So you're welcome to use my iPad if you want to. Okay. If I have to find something, I'll call on you. I've got everything marked, so I'll be all right. I think. I just need time.
Is Griffin's iPad on the blink?
Something's on it.
What I do.
Okay, we're gonna start. Are you all right? Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 o'clock. We'll call our meeting to order. We are the Graham City Council. We appreciate everybody being here tonight. And rest assured, anyone that wants to speak to us will have an opportunity to do so. I'm going to call on Chris Howell, who is the pastor of the First Baptist Church, for our invocation. Chris, please. Would you want to give us a little rundown on how the church is doing?
The church is doing awesome.
There you go.
Doing just great. Everything's going very well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for letting me be here tonight. Let's bow and have a moment of prayer together. Our Father, as we come together in this very special time and place, we are mindful of these two individuals who have passed away recently that we want to make sure and mention, and all of us be in prayer for their families. Inspector Harold Kernodle, Chief Chunk Purdue, we want to remember them, remember their service, remember how important they were to this community, and remember their families as they go through what is a very difficult time right now. And we just thank you for them, and thank you for their friends and family and their service. And God, as we come together during this time, may you bless this great city of Graham. May you bless these women and men who serve diligently on this council. May you give this council the wisdom to make the decisions, recognizing how they affect the lives of the individuals in this community, recognizing that every decision has an impact, and that we all are in a great community, and we want it to continue to be that way and continue to grow in that way, being a great place for families to come and live and grow, and a place where we come together and meet the needs of those in need in our community. God, help us to be that kind of family as we come together in your name, and may you just bless this time in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, first thing we're going to do is our consent agenda. First is A, approval of minutes October the 1st. B is approval of minutes October the 22nd. C is approved tax releases and refunds. D, authorize the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk to enter into agreement on behalf of the city and the First Baptist Church. E is approve a resolution authorizing the lease agreement with Alamance Arts. F is approve request from Downtown Development Coordinator Mary Fawcett to close the 100 block of West Elm Street. G is approve resolution declaring surplus and authorizing sale and upset bid process for 0.077 acres property on East Moore Street. And H, approve requests by the Alamance County Veterans Organization to close the 100 and 200 blocks of East Elm Street from 7 to 8 on Saturday. Does anybody want to pull anything off the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to pull item E.
Item E. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to pull item D.
Anyone else? With that being said, I need a motion to approve A, B, C, F, G, and H of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, sir. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Okay, authorize the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk to enter into an agreement on behalf of the city with the First Baptist Church of Graham for public parking. Melody, questions, please?
No, sir. What I would like to do is commend the staff on such an incredible agreement. Most of the public is not aware of these things. They go on like this. They're done just in a consent agenda. What has happened is that we have done a consent agreement with the First Baptist Church. We will be gaining 40 public parking spaces downtown because of this. And that's quite an adjustment and quite a good thing for us in the downtown area. So I appreciate the hard work of the staff and what you have done to get us to this point.
Griffin, questions?
No, sir.
Chip, questions?
No question.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I do, Mayor. Thank you. So Frankie, you're leading this up to a certain extent, I guess, and Mary as well. Explain it as far as do we have these agreements out there? We've got one that currently exists, and just explain what this agreement is.
So in the grand scheme of things, maximize land use, you would like to find a dual use. The church primarily uses the parking for its services and Sunday nights, Sundays, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights. We have a need for the use for parking 8 to 5 and then special events. We have a similar relationship with Presbyterian Church where we will provide some maintenance and upkeep of the facility in exchange to allow the general public to use the facility as public parking.
We also provide snow removal.
Snow removal, we'll do some striping, some asphalt maintenance if required. This particular parking lot, there is a little bit of work we need to do, some ADA work, some minor repair work. It's nothing that's too taxing on our forces. So we look forward to this partnership and thank the church for your cooperation as well.
Yeah. So the Presbyterian Church has had an agreement with us for how long now?
A couple decades or more
Or more.
that I'm aware of.
And that agreement's worked out pretty well.
Yes. In fact, I believe we renewed that agreement in the last year or so.
Yes. Yeah. And so we'll basically maintain and keep the lot up, remove the snow, repair it when it needs it, and restripe it just for the use of the off hours when the church is not using it.
Yes.
Okay.
And we do have other agreements, not necessarily for parking every day, but some overflow parking with Peak Resources. We have somewhat of an agreement with them for overflow parking at our rec center where they can overflow into our rec center parking lot and vice versa. And a shared driveway as well.
Thank you.
So, with that being said, we'll move you to page 12 and ask for a motion from the council.
So move.
Thank you, ma'am. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor of?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed likewise. Next, we go to E, approve resolution authorizing lease agreement with Alamance Arts. Griffin, you had a question with this?
I did. And number one, on the first page of the agreement of lease, it says the start date is the first day of January 2019. Is this retroactive?
We can make it retroactive. The prior lease expired
Okay.
about that time. And so the draft worked from that date forward.
All right. I just wanted clarity on that it wasn't supposed to be 2020 since we're coming on that.
Chip, questions?
No question.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Melody?
Yes, sir.
With that, I will move you to page 24. I apologize, page 16, and ask you for a motion from the council.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. All right, that completes the consent agenda. All right, next we go to old business, quasi judicial public hearing, SUP 1902 Moore Street Townhouses. And I will go to Brian for our explanation of the quasi judicial hearing process.
Okay, all right. Going to read a statement, ladies and gentlemen. An application for a special use permit requires the city council to hold a quasi judicial hearing. The council will move from its usual role as a legislative body to a judicial body. The city council will be acting as a court would act to establish a factual background to support a decision about the rights of differently affected landowners. The council will be applying the rules of equity, and they will take evidence and obtain exhibits in order to establish the record. If there is an appeal from an aggrieved party, the record will be reviewed by a higher court to determine the validity of the council's decision. Tonight's hearing is for the consideration of a special use permit pursuant to the City of Graham Development Ordinances. This is a public hearing, and anyone wishing to speak, present evidence, should come forward at this time to be sworn in.
So anybody wants to speak on this, come forward and be sworn.
Mr. Mayor, this item was tabled by the planning board again, and they requested that it be tabled one last time by the city council. It was suggested at that time by the board that it would be the last time that the planning board would permit this item to be tabled, as it was deemed to be unfair to the residents who had to come out each time. And yet, because it's a quasi-judicial hearing, they did not open the evidentiary hearing at each meeting. They only did so at the first, and the idea would be to do it one more time in their November meeting, and then it would come before the city council to be heard. At this time, there is no recommendation from the planning board, and unlike a rezoning, the city council, by their ordinances, have to wait until such time as there has been a recommendation by the planning board to take action upon the item.
I agree with the planning board. It's not fair to drag people out like this and not act on it when it's on our agenda. But let me poll the council first before we make any kind of motion and see what we're doing. I'll poll y'all to see if you've got any, you talk to anybody about this or know anything other than what we know here.
And I agree, Mayor, and I think the planning board made a smart decision by putting a deadline on this and saying that some action was going to be taken at the next meeting, but I do agree to allow them to continue to go through this and thoroughly vet this project and give them the opportunity.
Have you talked to anybody about this project? That's
No.
what we're polling
No,
the council now.
No.
Chip?
No.
Griffin? Melody?
No.
Okay. So can we do a consensus? Do we need to do a vote? Okay. Then I make a motion, we postpone this till the planning board hears it.
I'll
Is
second
that,
that.
is that acceptable?
Until the next, a date certain to the planning board, here's a date certain to the next council.
And we've got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry we're dragging you up here like this. But we will still keep letting you know when we're going to act on this, okay? So if there's anybody that was looking at this ready to leave, go ahead. We'll give you a second or two.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Hey, Chief. Next, we're going to go to B on old business. This is the downtown master plan, and we're going to Nathan for the information from the staff. Nathan, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. After the last meeting, there were a list of items that were suggested by members of the city council to be added into an appendix to the plan. That has been done. They were added to the draft document. They're the last page, the last page is the last cover page. They're the page before the last page in the plan. And the conditions have been written out, presented in the city council's packet, as well as been posted on the website in the interim.
Okay. Questions for the staff? Melody, we'll start with you, please.
No, sir.
Griffin.
Yeah, I do. I've got several here. I guess I'm talking to Nathan. Nathan, does this plan in any way, or staff in general, if anybody wants to chime in, does this plan in any way recommend rear entry parking?
No,
Does this plan prevent any traffic from going through downtown on Main Street?
no,
Does this plan recommend a reduction in parking in the 4-block downtown area?
no,
Does this plan suggest or encourage eminent domain?
no,
If adopted, does this plan officially move any traffic to Maple or Marshall Streets?
no,
Does this plan bind or commit us to any specific projects such as streetscape, infrastructure repair, sidewalk design, intersection configuration, parking configuration, number of parking spaces, or anything else above or below the ground?
no,
Does this plan commit Graham in any way to paying for any specific project?
no,
Does this plan, as submitted tonight, allow staff to investigate and apply for grants from the federal and state levels, as well as nonprofits that could fund hundreds of thousands of dollars in infrastructure upgrades?
yes,
Will those grants then come before City Council before approval?
yes,
Okay, Chip, questions, please.
No questions. I do. So Nathan, at the last work session, we had discussed the possibility of a couple of different wordings of the goals of implementation. One was the removal of around Court Square. I think the mayor had suggested that. I noticed that's still in the language of these goals that are in front of us.
I'm sorry, removal of,
Yeah, because we had talked about if we're not going to include a splash block in any future planning, a splash pad, I'm sorry, in any future planning, that we should just not only specify around Court Square, but just say period, and just eliminate around Court Square so that it just stands true for the entire plan. Was that the
Yes, sir.
goal?
Mhm.
Okay. With the elimination of around Court Square would just leave it eliminated throughout the concept of the entire plan as far as consideration in the future.
okay, so from the fourth bullet, scratch a line through around Court Square such that it just says additional planning and design should eliminate the idea of a splash park, period.
Correct. Also, too, there was some discussion. Now, the last goal that's listed here talks about the planning and design should not pursue a roundabout at McAden and South Main Street, but we had actually talked about going just one step further. And of course, we don't have the entire plan in the agenda because we all have copies of that, but eliminating the image of the roundabout, is that in the works as well?
So any renderings that would have to be redone would need to be funded to have an artist spend time to redo those
To
renderings.
eliminate it?
If there's a rectangle picture that I can drop on top of it, I'm happy to do that if that's something that the council wants. One would be more expensive, the other would
Sure.
look like staff who didn't know graphic design did it.
And I was okay with the wording, but I know that there was some concern in the meeting during the work session about the actual image there of the roundabout and the possibility of removing that. And I understand that once we put everything back together with these changes, that we can make those modifications. But I just want to make sure for the record that that would be something that would be respected once we get through the process and we have a plan for future development.
You have the floor, Mayor Pro Tem, but if you allow me to answer,
Absolutely.
I just did not want that hanging over Roger Owsley's property and someone see it later on and say, and he's trying to sell it and he's got Owsley's roundabout sitting there on it. So,
I agree.
yeah, I appreciate what you're saying.
May I speak?
But, well, he's got the floor. He's got to
And
release.
I relinquish, please.
The thinking was in removing the rendering that it affected other pages and appeared throughout. And I'd go to Nathan. Still not in favor of gutting a part of the overall 30,000 foot view. But is there a way to stamp it, or as you said, put a rectangle over it, but just stamp that roundabout not advised or
Absolutely.
something?
Yeah, the same way that there's,
There, you got the language.
I mean, but it makes it a visual record as well. I don't have a problem with that. I just think, as Nathan alluded to, we have to re-engage the consultants to get a rendering that's
Oh,
on
absolutely.
par with what we already have. If that's the part we don't like, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah, and I'm okay with any way that it will satisfy the request of the mayor, and which I agree with the concern of just having that image there. If we can just somehow,
How do we move forward?
He had a very good suggestion and Nathan had a solution. I'm fine with that.
Which was,
He was going to block it and then we'll remove the mention of it.
and I suggested another solution that would stamp it not advised, as opposed to looking at like cut and paste, like he said, poor graphic
Yeah.
design. When we apply for grants and things like this and submit a formal document, kind of needs to look formal.
I know we're doing like a talk here
Yeah,
instead of
That's
you
why
having the
I
floor.
asked, yeah.
But we removed the back end parking without any problem, but we're having a problem removing anything else. I don't see where that's.
The rendering for rear entry parking is still in the plan.
in order to redo it, the whole thing would have to be redone by the consultant. And so the language that's here as the conditions are the most binding part of it, because this is city council's language rather than the consultant's language. But I could put a watermark over top of any pieces that you would want there, just like there's draft across this page that said whatever on all the images of reverse angle parking, all the images of roundabouts, whatever was the council's desire.
So everything in the goals for implementation would be done that way. So Splash Park, I didn't check to see if it was still in there. Is it still in? Is the picture still in?
I edited none of the photos. This
So-
plan currently says additional planning and design should eliminate the idea of a splash park, period.
Okay, so the thing to do is to figure out how to cover it up or use it. And again, I agree with Griffin as well, that if we want to use this as a grant document, then we need to be careful about how we do that so that you don't ruin the integrity. But at the same time, we need to be sure that all this takes precedence.
You'll have the floor.
And so the final question is for you, Mayor. How do we move forward on this as far as a consensus to implement this into the plan? Well, this will go to a formal vote this evening because there's not a motion that's formally in front of us.
Are you asking me, are we going to vote on this evening?
I guess I am.
I
Dan.
think that's where Griffin was pushing it, for us to vote on it, is whether we say yay or nay.
Okay.
So since he gave away his time, I'll hold the council again. Melody, have you got anything else?
I don't think so.
Griffin?
No, sir.
Chip?
No, sir.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. With that being said, then we're going to poll y'all. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I have a two procedural questions, I guess. It's not quite clear to me, this document that's on the board and that I gather is the summary of your work session, has it been incorporated into the underlying document or is that what is pending?
That's what is pending. It's not been incorporated. So we haven't made any changes to it because during the work session, we did not vote on making any changes.
All right. And then I guess my question is, and it's mainly drawn by looking at items later in the agenda, though it's not marked here, is this a first reading of this or is this some later or more final determination?
I'll go to Brian on that question because this, in my opinion, this is not a change of our ordinance. It's a plan, a conceptual plan. Yeah.
Okay.
Tell me, Brian.
You're correct, Mayor. It's conceptual plan. It's not, it doesn't have to go to first reading or second reading. It's just simple majority.
I hope that answered your question.
All right.
So if anybody wants to speak on this, we'll have 3 minutes. And first, let me ask, is there anybody here that has not spoke on it before that would like to go first?
I just want to clarify something.
Would you, if you come up here, everything is recorded.
I'm here on behalf of Rod Crossley. He's out of town.
Yes, sir.
But I just
Let me
want to
have your
verify.
name and address, if you would, please.
My name is Daniel Winkle. I'm in Burlington, 2409 Delaney Drive.
Mr. Winkle, thank you for
I've
being here,
worked
sir.
in Graham for over 35 years.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to make sure that you're tabling this or taking the steps to, we're taking the roundabout off the table, period?
That's
Is that what we're
we're
saying?
That's what we were saying, yes.
Okay,
But after we hear everybody talk, then we'll come back and.
okay.
we'll
I just
post-
wanted to make sure that, because I understand the planning part of it and I just wanted to make sure that I heard that you're going to take the roundabout out. That's on the table at least.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Winkle. So let's start in the first, and we'll start on the first row. Mary, you got anybody on that row want to speak? The second row, Bonnie's row. Let me
Hi,
have
Jeff
your name.
Lineberger, 213 North Melville Street. I just wanted to, first of all, Mr. Mayor, good to have you back. I'm
Thank
glad
you,
to see
sir.
You looking good, looking well.
Now you're lying to me.
Well, that way you may listen a
Yes,
little more
sir.
closely.
I might look better than I did, but go ahead.
Anyway, I would just like to make a statement that I do think the loading zone access is fine, number of parking spaces are fine, but I do think that not every parking space along Court Square and along Main Street, 100 block of Main Street is sacred. I would really like to advocate for some kind of landscaping, treescapes along the Main Street. For example, 4 bump outs maybe with medium-sized trees. You give up those 8 parking spots, I think it would be well worth the aesthetic appeal. There'll probably be more people coming downtown. If it looks good, And I do think it would be worth that. Other than that, I do think in the past, I haven't heard it tonight yet, since I'm the first speaker, that, I've heard some business owners say that they were the stakeholders of downtown Graham. I really take offense at that. I pay taxes as do all residents of Graham, not just the downtown businesses. We all have a stake in what downtown Graham looks like and whether it prospers or not.
Thank you, sir. Well said. Anybody else in that? Okay, Jan, please. Jan, it's nice to have you here.
Nice to see you there, Mayor. Jan Searle is 526 East Pine Street. I haven't been at the last two meetings. I've been traveling and I had a new car that helped, but I did 6,000 miles on the East Coast, never left the time zone. And it was for fun. And I went and looked at small towns. I drove to find towns that were of the same size and looked, basically like Graham, to see what made them tick, how they succeeded, how they didn't, and talked to some merchants. One of the things I was interested, because I've got the tree board, that they all agreed with the study that I brought up before the city council before, the value of trees monetarily to them as business, of bringing in customers, of attracting customers. The second thing was that they all liked and recommended the banner sign, the signs that hang like the old fashioned signs. So when you walk down a city street, you're looking at signs that tell you what the businesses are. And so I told them what was going on here and what we were looking at. And they said the most important thing you can do is get people to think of going downtown and turning downtown and going to it. And people are naturally attracted towards areas that look restful and particularly in the South, cool. And they recommended that and if we have a town like theirs, that we keep the feeling of a city center, that the small business, it's very important, but that everyone own the city center and see it as the magnetic center of the city. And in that respect, I think what's happening downtown, I understand the plan's concerns to businesses, but we are planning ahead. We're doing long-range planning here, and we operate under the 2035 plan. And I think anything we do, we have to be able to visualize it in years ahead. And that means anything that's temporary, be it a sign, that they are all in play rather than planning ahead around something, making something static that isn't. But they all like the sound of Graham everywhere I went, and they particularly thought we were doing some interesting stuff.
Thank you, Jan. Anyone else on that row? On the next row then. Nice to have you here, sir.
Hey, Mayor, Council. Nathan Griffin from Green Level, 1745, North Carolina 49. Looking at residents here in Graham, I thought I'd speak because I think this is an interesting time and a unique time for Graham. As someone who has lived in Alamance County now for about 8 years, I've read sort of the draft plan for Graham, and you folks have your work cut out for you. Just in the issue of the roundabout, I can completely understand how you want to sort of remove it from there so there's no indication that it's a possibility or a potential for the future. But I agree with Griffin. I think that, for the future of Graham, removing it the right way, if this is a long-standing document that will be used for grant proposals and such, simply slapping a white box over it or pulling out an image from this proposal may hurt any potential grants. So I think that simply on the issue of how we remove a roundabout from that proposal, a basic vote of do we simply remove it and slap a white box on it, yay or nay, I think is the right direction to go. Like I said, I'm somebody who's interested in Graham. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm somebody who is avid engagement in community. I love what Graham is doing. I love the direction it's going. I think that these are big decisions, even though they might seem minor. So that's all. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Before you sit down, let's go to Nathan. And Nathan, what would a reprinting of this document cost us, do you think? Have you got a rough guesstimate on that?
To have the consultant re-render the portions that
Yes.
are in question. I am not an artist and I do not know how to draw, but they were very reasonably priced for the portions that they did do.
I mean, if we did this, we wouldn't break our bank if we had a final rendering.
If there was a price not to exceed, I would be happy to say the council liked the plan. If you guys would re-render it for less than this amount of money.
That's a very good point. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Anyone else on that row? On the next row? You're getting to be a regular here, aren't you?
Sorry. Linda Barnhill, 404 Forest Drive. I have a couple of questions about the goals for implementation. Earlier, we were told that the parking lot next to Roasted Coffee Depot would not be turned into a park. Is that correct?
I was not in favor of that idea since we have a park 1/2 a block away.
But it's not here.
True, very true. It's not, but that could be in this rendering that we're talking about, the final rendering, that could be eliminated.
Mr. Mayor, that was already accomplished based on the feedback at the last meeting, and the rendering was still used. It was just placed at Sesquicentennial Park instead of next to the Roasted Coffee Depot.
So we're talking about an update of the Sesquicentennial Park. I
Okay.
got it right.
But that parking lot will remain, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The other thing is we've been talking about the roundabout. As I understand it, there was also a roundabout suggested for the street between First United Methodist Church and its parking lot.
Yes, ma'am.
We have not discussed that.
We brushed over it, but have we discussed it in depth? No.
That would remove parking for the church. It would make it unsafe for the citizens to cross that road. And I would like for that, if possible, to be put into the goals, because that roundabout would really create difficulties for the church and possibly render it useless in terms of the safety of the members crossing the streets and having enough parking. They've also bought the rest of the block in case they want to enlarge the church and build on more. So that investment would be totally useless if they couldn't get more if they lost parking. And that said, y'all have done a wonderful job. I don't think we need all the polarization we've had, but hopefully in the future we won't have that. And I'd like possibly if you could put in that each separate phase as it comes up would need to be discussed and approved.
That is in the wordage. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barnhill, did you want to speak?
Since I got to move, I'll go ahead and come up here.
Okay.
I left my notes.
Good.
So I'll try to just do this from memory. Ben Barnhill. I live in the same place she does, 404 Forest Drive. We've been living in sin for 43 years. But I just want to say that I see a lot of signs around the city of Graham that says, keep Graham the same. And just go back a few weeks or a few months when those signs came out. There's been a lot of changes. So let's go back and close all the businesses, and let's go back and pressure wash the murals. Take all those down. Let's not change it. Let's leave it like it is. If we leave it like it is, it's going to rot. You walk through downtown Graham and walk down the sidewalks. They're okay. They need improving. The streets need improving. And she's going to kill me, But as far as the roundabouts, I spend a lot of time in Forsyth County, and they have installed a lot of roundabouts. And I purposely go down the streets that have the roundabouts because the traffic doesn't stop. But it doesn't go very fast. Roundabouts work. And sometimes it takes people's property. And it's a hardship on them. But McAdam Street, I avoid that intersection like the plague. I bank at Wachovia, and when I go out the back parking lot, I go over to Maple Avenue. I do not make a left turn to go out there. And the roundabout down at that's proposed for down near the Methodist Church, that's a horrible intersection and needs improving. And I don't know whether a stoplight or a 4-way stops or 16-way stops, I don't know what would be an improvement, but a roundabout is something to consider. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Barnhill.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Good luck tonight. The row behind Mr. Barnhill and the former Mrs. Barnhill. The next row after that then. Third from the back row. Mrs. Owsley, your row. And the chief of police's row. Chief, do you want to speak? Anybody else? Mr. Okay. Then let's come back to the front. Come on, Daniel, say something. All right, anyone else on that row? The next row. Good to see you, Nathan.
Good to see you, Mayor. Glad to see you back.
Thank you, sir.
I don't really have anything to speak on. I just want to say I really appreciate you guys toughing this out, taking the input from the citizens and from businesses, evaluating things and moving forward with it because it's overdue. Thank you.
Before you sit down, give me your name and your address.
Nate Perry,
There you go.
201 South Maple Street.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir. It's good to have you.
City Council, it's good to see you here. My name's Richard Wright. I was born 2 blocks down off of Court Square. I've lived on Court Square 65 years, all my life. I am now a proud homeowner on Marshall Street, and I'm a proud homeowner on Maple Street. So I got both of the streets are in controversy right now. I'm sure you did not do this because of me. But I just want to commend the City Council for your openness and your honesty and your friendliness, because I know that you know yourselves that you're not just dealing with city streets, bricks, mortar, wood, glass, but you're dealing with the terrains of our hearts. This is not just a town. This is where we live. This is where we have raised our children. And we are depending upon you to help us keep our children safe. And I know that you're doing that. And I appreciate that so much. But please remember that Graham is Graham because it is Graham. It's never going to be a big city. It's not going to be Hillsborough. It's not going to be Pittsburgh. Sometimes it's barely even Graham. All right. Which they used to, when I was a little kid, I used to come to downtown Graham to play. And I was always wondering, well, what is uptown Graham? And then I figured, well, uptown Graham is probably Burlington. But what I want to do is just commend you. Thank you for your care that you're taking in this. And I also want to say one thing about Chunk Purdue, that our house out here on Maple Street that I own now, it burned to the ground one day after Christmas. And it put my mom, who was a widow, and her 4 children who were in their pajamas in the snow, day after Christmas. Person who came to our house was Chunk. Mama called him, and he came. Now that's Graham right there. And so that's what I've got in front of me here too. So thank you so much, and bless you.
I will have to say that Chunk Purdue was top of the line for Graham. Yes, sir. I came to work here. He was named the police chief right after William Miles, so he was a good one. Anyone else on that row? The next row. Janae, it's good to see you, ma'am.
Thank you, you too. Janae Farrar, 141 East Hardin Street. Thank you guys all for the work that you've done with us, with the community on this plan. I know it's been a big undertaking. I know it's been stressful. I know it's been time consuming for you guys as it's been for us. If we take away nothing else from this, let's take away this. It's been refreshing to see this many people who are passionate about this city, a city that means something different to all of us. Let's take away that most of us care. Let's appreciate the many opportunities we've been given to make our voices heard. From the many meetings with Tool Design to the opportunities with City Council to public meetings. If the goal here is to get everyone to agree, then we will never succeed. The best way to ensure success is to listen. The best way to ensure success is to create a plan for success, a plan for the future, a plan to get us there from the present day, a plan that acknowledges who we were, who we are, and who we will strive to be. So whether you've been here in Graham for 30 years or for 1, this is your home. Let's come together. Let's be good to each other despite our differences. And let's work together to spread factual information and to support each other, because this is Graham.
On Randy's Road, Gary? Anyone else on that road? Come on. Richard, it's good to see you. Been a long time since I've seen you. Where you been?
We gotta quit doing, we gotta meet a little more often. Richard Shevlin, 510 Wildwood Lane. I'm gonna bore everybody. My questions are more technical about the drawings of the infrastructure. Have we invested in the drawings of the infrastructure? Do we know what we need? Do we have a cost?
No, we
Well,
have
first of
not.
all, do we know what the need is?
We know what the need is, and that's proper water pressure, proper sewer lines, and stormwater.
But
That's
do
the
we,
need.
based on what we have, do we know what we need to add to the system or take away from it?
Until we do the engineering, no, we do not.
Okay. And so with that, we probably don't have a cost or an estimate cost of the
That
technical
will
end.
come with the engineering and the planning.
Okay. And is there a date that we plan on doing that?
Our budget year starts in July, so it'll come up in July.
7/20/20?
Yes.
Thank you.
Questions? Did I miss anything there? Is that?
No, that's good.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I have reached out to get a proposal for preliminary design engineering, and it's 6 figures,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
easy.
Oh, yes.
Richard, you hear him?
Yeah.
He has reached out to see what the engineering design alone will be, and that's before we turn it right. And it's over 6 figures, so it's going to be costly. You know, and we've stressed several times during these meetings that if we do the infrastructure, which we want to do, will we have money to do all the rest of the stuff? And when we're 6 figures on looking at it, it's going to be big when we start digging. Randy? Anybody else on that row? The next row. Come up, sir.
Paul Hardin, 16 Northeast Court Square. First of all, I'd like to say, I like that line of questioning you was with Nate Griffin. I like that. I like that just getting out there and the factual thing there. Second of all, I talk to a lot of people that move to Graham. They're walking around Graham. They see the bakery. They come in. Oh, it's a bakery. Oh yeah, we just moved here from Graham. We moved to Graham because of the charm and all. I haven't had anybody come in there yet and say, I heard y'all was going to do this. I heard y'all had this coming. They all fell in love with Graham because of the way Graham is. Okay. And I've noticed we've had a lot of new businesses open up in Graham, which is great. It's really great. But one thing that really kills me is people come in and say, I love Graham. I love Graham. Let's change it. Well, if you loved it so much, what do you want to change it for? Yeah, I know we're going to sooner or later advance and do different things. Sure, we are. I mean, that's just the way of the world. But I think we ought to take some real consideration in this. There's things that we can do to Graham now. I was standing on the corner there and I was looking around Graham. I was kind of remember, I was raised here. I went to school here. I walked to school, everything. I come through Graham. I remember Graham, it was like I said, my mama used to manage the Pope's dime store. That was Ben Franklin's. I remember Graham like that. And so Graham has changed some. But, we could do some things like, I've noticed like our flowers and all in the summertime, we put those little bitty flowers in those things. We could feel those things. We could feel them. You could look over there like at EP Gates where they put those flower things in. You see how full they are? Why can't our boxes all around the city be just like that? It would look a lot. I mean, you got the box on the corner over there, one of those wooden boxes, and it ain't got nothing in it. I mean, it don't look like it's got nothing in it. I often see the city come by and water them. I don't know what they watering because it ain't nothing in there. If we could just take stuff like that and use what we got, and do what we need to do. That's about all I got for you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, anybody else on Paul's Row? The next row. Lisa? Anybody on Lisa's row? Nice to see you.
Nice to see y'all. I'm Lisa Kyle Moser. I live at 217 Guthrie Street, and I work at Court Square Florist, which is at 22 Northwest on the Court Square. I am almost a Graham Square miler. I've lived here the majority of my life. And as a child, I loved it. When I went off to Carolina to college, I swore I would never come back to Graham. I was good on Graham. I had bigger places to go. And now I'm back in Graham, and there's nowhere else that I want to be. We've got it all right here, and it's growing. It's amazing to see the things that are happening right here, right now in Graham. But it hurts my feelings that there's such animosity right now in our beautiful city of Graham about that progress, because it's not necessary. We all want Graham to grow, but we all have different ideas for that. And that's where the council comes in. That's where the consultants come in, but everybody's got a different opinion about that. It would be great if we could all have some input about that progress. And maybe it wasn't so seemingly so drastic at one time, because it scares a lot of us a great deal to think that what we know as downtown Graham is going to change, because just as Paul just said, we love it just the way it is. When I was growing up, we had Crawford's Department Store, Hal's Men's Shop, Mickey Lynn, Pope's, Ben Franklin, like he said. We had all these wonderful merchants in downtown Graham that we didn't have to go to Burlington. We could, but we had great stores right here in Graham. Now we've got some great restaurants and some great bars, and I'm grateful. I play music. If anyone had ever told me 25 years ago that I would be able to play music in downtown Graham, I would have told them they were crazy. Now we have all these great bars. We have a scene in Graham. That's fantastic. But we still have a lot of these businesses that have always been here. And where I work at the florist, a great deal of our customers are getting on up in years, as we all are. And a lot of those people roll in on Saturdays to pick up flowers to take to church. And they can't park at the Presbyterian church. They do well to get into our store from the very front if they find a parking place up front. And they've been coming there for 30, 33 years, 35 years. And they're not going to come if they can't come in. I want to see Graham continue to grow. But I think as we grow, it would be really nice if we retain some of the things that make Graham so special. And I think that some of the citizens are overwhelmed because the idea of this great big plan, it's scary. It's scary to some of us because we don't understand that it's going to be 20, 30, 40 years. You know, I won't be here to see that. I hope Graham always flourishes. But my father was a Graham city councilman, and my father brought McDonald's to Graham and Cookout to Graham, and no one loved Graham more than my father. He wanted to see Graham be the best city ever. And I'd like for it to continue that way without the animosity and the sides. It hurts my feelings right now that so many people are so worked up about this. We all want the same thing. We want Graham to be the best that it can be. I just think we need to maybe meet more with the council as citizens and work together to do that and go into the future with a little bit of this and a little bit of that together. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
And I appreciate everything, you guys.
Ronnie Isley, 510 Mendel Terrace. I appreciate the whole council being here tonight. Mary, good to see you back.
Thanks, sir.
Griffin, I appreciate your questions. I had several of those myself, and you got them answered. One thing I haven't heard, and someone did mention, was loading zones. Are they in
The appendix said that we would leave the loading zones as close to possible in the position they're in right now.
Okay. I guess that all depends on whether or not we put those 40-foot sidewalks in and narrow it down. But that's another, around Court Square, was that mentioned or not? Parking, it was mentioned?
It was mentioned that we would leave the parking alone. The changes we wanted to make was on parking for the sheriff and parking for the clerk of court, to have them at 5 o'clock when they leave and go home,
Sure.
open those parking places for the use of, for the theater and the restaurants.
So all parking around Court Square will stay as is?
As is, unless we have a fire situation like a new fire hydrant, or ADA, when they come in there and mark the ADA, that would determine the parking places. And the third one was, what was the third? Well, yeah. Well, I mentioned the fire safety, so, but that was the only difference we were going to make.
So that was a lot of businesses, I'm sure, were concerned about that. I'm sure the
They
bakery
are,
is, you know.
and we understand.
And, you know,
Like Paul, you know.
I can walk, but again, the ones that can't, you know, and I've been here 58 years. I definitely am a square miler, and I've never seen Graham look better, and I say more power to it. And, but the whole thing, if you want to see a park, if you want to see trees, go to one of our mini parks. Come out to the woods and hunt with me if you want to see trees. I work at Food Line, and I talk to people every day, and I've yet to find one that liked the idea of narrowing down that street to one way, 2 lanes, and then the roundabouts are just a joke. I think about it when I go to you go to the mall, you go to even Food Lines has them, the little bitty islands in the middle of the parking lot with a tree in it. It just baffles me that, you know, they think this is going to help the appearance. Downtown is business, it's growing. And I say, improve what we need to improve. You voted on that, do the infrastructure. And as far as all the rest of the renderings and drawing the plan, I say, think twice. What you're doing now is going to have consequences way down the road. You know, we don't want to make a beautiful ghost town, as someone said. And I think I'll take that into consideration.
Thank you, Ronnie. Anyone else on Ronnie's road? And the back road? Jennifer? Anybody else on that road? Start with Chris Stokes. He's on duty. If he comes to speak, it's going to be repercussions. He's one of our firefighters tonight.
Anybody had something to say? Jennifer Taliato. Excuse me one moment. What exactly are you streaming? Your camera is pointing this direction. What exactly are you streaming? Are you streaming the speakers? Okay, then if you will turn the camera in that direction, right now, that's not where that's looking.
What are we talking about?
They're streaming this direction. If you will, please stream over to the speakers. Excuse me?
Some people couldn't be here and they asked,
We do, and the whole meeting is being filmed.
they asked her to live stream.
Okay.
There's
let's
like, I
just-
don't know,
You were
40
holding the camera for, so let's be sure we get the right thing.
It's a public meeting. If they want to stream,
Okay.
they can stream.
Just
So let's,
stream what you're
yeah.
streaming. but-
There's some people at the beach too that asked for us to stream it.
Just information wise, we do record these and send them live. So if you get the.
Are you live streaming?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
it's on YouTube.
Okay, well, they didn't know. They asked us to live stream it. I don't know.
Okay, it's no
There's
problem.
40-some people watching
Let
it.
me- Name and address, Jennifer, if you would, please.
Jennifer Talley, 808 Sideview Street, Graham. So I loved what Lisa had to say. I love Graham, and I think that Graham has stood the test of time for 169 years. I'm sure at different times, people always think that the latest and greatest thing is the best thing. I'm sure when BMOC was being built in Burlington, they thought that was the latest and greatest thing, and now it's a ghost town. I'm sure when I look at the old pictures of downtown Burlington and what it used to be before they started changing the traffic patterns in downtown Burlington, it was a thriving place. It was where Jerry Peterman and Chip Turner would hang out and drag Main, and a lot of other teenagers would drag Main. It was a great place. And I think that Graham's very, very special. And I put my money on the fact that Graham will survive here another 100 and some years if we don't mess it up. And that's truly what I want to see. I've been a catalyst for change in downtown Graham since I've been here. If you look at the before and after pictures of the buildings that we've purchased, it's, dramatically changed. I am concerned about the phasing. So if you guys could address that, because the phasing in the plan talks about phasing being now. A lot of things being implemented between the first and the third year. I'm concerned about the people on Marshall and Maple Street and their property rights, and that if this plan's passed, that those people will have to legally notify any potential buyers of this plan. And I don't think it's correct to make changes and not legally notify people from the city about how that might impact or impair their property. I was with a real estate attorney today closing on a piece of property, and I asked his opinion. And he said they're going to have to disclose it every single time. And I think, Jerry, you said in your meeting, if that drawing is there, how is that man ever going to sell that piece of property? So I think that I hope that the council won't vote on this tonight. I hope that they'll allow the citizens of Graham to vote people in to be able to, and maybe, if they want this, then obviously they'll vote for the same people. And if they don't, then we'll have new people. So I would prefer for them to defer this to the next city council meetings, next city council meeting to be able to be handled by the new council. But if you decide to do that, if you could please address the phasing and also address the fact of one of the things that it talks about in the Graham Historic Resources Handbook is that we wouldn't change the street patterns, street widths, street cross sections, and that all of those would be maintained for the historic layout of downtown Graham. The granite curbs, for instance, are over 100 years old here in Graham. The master plan, as it was originally scaled out, said that it would be, they would get input from the Historic Commission, and it would go before their commission and be approved or not approved, planning and zoning, which none of those things happened after the fact. And just don't see what the rush is to pass it if we're not gonna, if the phasing isn't true and we're not actually gonna start on it tomorrow or next week. That's my concern. I love Jerry's comments in the previous meeting where he was wanting to take out a lot of things. If we have no intentions of doing them, let's take them out. is the phasing of NC 87 traffic. Are we going to look at those alternates, not just for Maple and Marshall, but these other roads that Griffin has suggested? I don't want to see a 60-foot sidewalk in front of the Bank of America. And one of the big problems is everybody keeps saying there's no eminent domain, and that's fine. If you want to say that, you can say that, but if you're dealing with people's property rights and their individual property and you have to do X, Y, and Z, I don't see how in the world you're ever going to be able to put in a roundabout without using eminent domain to take someone like Owsley's property, because he's certainly not going to give it to the city. So if there's some explanation for how you're going to implement these things, I believe even Lee mentioned to Frankie last time, even for the infrastructure. He said, is that going to be on people's private property? Are you going to have to deal with people's personal private property? And Frankie responded, yes.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the back row? Jason? No? Come on up, Courtney. Oh, Jason, never mind. Nice to have you here, Jason.
Jason Cox, 200 North Main Street. First off, to the woman who spoke about some of the divisiveness, there has been a childlike amount of hyperbole that has come out over the last several months. I've watched statements that people made that no level of reasonable fact checking can support. And that's where a lot of the anger and frustration comes from. I've watched at least 8-month process that I'm aware of. I watched at least 4 city council meetings of deliberation purely for the concept of a conceptual plan, not to implement a single action, not to even begin getting engineering fees. So a lot of this really comes down to, unfortunately, fear mongering, and there's really not a better word I can find for it. What I do want to be clear on is where we currently are. First of all, no, Graham is not Hillsborough or Pittsboro. Graham's actually double the size of Hillsborough. It's triple the size of Pittsboro in terms of actual population. It sits half a mile off the interstate. Yes, Graham will grow. The downtown will grow. Unfortunately, a lot of the growth may be decided by people who don't sit in this room and don't really care about what we're talking about. But not acting will guarantee that a lot of that agenda will get decided rather than people who are here participating tonight. Ultimately, what we're talking about is a city investing for the future. I do not claim square miler status. I have lived here for over 20 years, married a Hall River girl, and that brought me here. I'm from Eastern North Carolina, and I've watched exactly the end result of a place that will cling to no change of any kind. I can tell you exactly what it looks like. It's not good, okay? That's the simple truth. When people talk about love, I think they need to use the word stewardship. And when you talk about stewardship, it means leaving a place better than you found it. It also means leaving a place in a condition that may not be exactly what your absolute favorite thing is, but thinking about the people who will come after you. My request is this, that the city invest in itself, just as I have chosen to invest in the city, both in my time and in terms of actual capital. That investment will be dictated by a series of steps from this plan that very well may outlive me, and I'm not that old just yet. But in the meantime, what I do have a problem with is the idea that as long as we can keep finding a single minor problem, a flaw, a thing that we worry about that keeps us up at night, that should actually prevent action of any kind. That effectively holds a city and its constituents hostage. That's the concern that I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Anyone else want to speak? Come on up, Courtney. Let's have your name and address, please, ma'am.
Courtney Talley, 808 Sideview Street, Graham.
Nice to have
My
you here.
question is, if this plan goes into an effect, will y'all increase taxes?
Pay for it.
Yes.
I cannot say for sure that we will not, but I would not vote for increasing it for majority of this plan, myself. Now, for the infrastructure, the water lines and sewer lines, if we cannot pay for them with our fund balance and stuff like that, and we get halfway through it, it's a possibility. It's always a possibility.
So if it goes into an effect, will, for the people that can't afford the taxes, what would you do about that? That can't afford the extra taxes?
That would be a problem that we'd have to see about. But I mean, it's a 5-person council, and none of these people sitting before you have put their hand down and say we were not going to raise taxes, because we just don't know what the future is going to bring. If we go in there and one of those lines runs under somebody's building and we have to skirt that building and go outside, it could take a $50,000 project and move it into $500,000. So I can't tell you that we would not raise taxes, but I can tell you I don't want to.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to add to that?
I
mean-
definitely would. Adopting a plan tonight does not spend any money.
No.
Not spending money requires no tax increase. Adopting a plan means we have a vision. We haven't chosen to spend any money on that vision. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Did we answer you? I hope we answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Come here. Whoops, wrong one. You're welcome. It wasn't a piece of candy. It was a Graham badge like that. Come up, Betsy Wood.
Chuck Talley, 808 Sodview Street. First thing I want to talk about the infrastructure. I just want to make sure that you do take the time to, instead of just jumping there and doing it, that you take the time to get a survey of the system done and understand the needs that you actually need before we commit to doing a bunch of stuff that we possibly do not need. All right, the size of the sewer mains on top of the hill don't need to be changed. Things like that. I've already called engineers and discussed it. The only time you run a larger than 8-inch sewer main is when the grade doesn't allow it and you have to go to 10 or 12 because you can't get a 0.5% fall. Okay. The next thing is I want to talk about key stakeholders. Lee and the mayor, you got to sit in a meeting with about 20 key stakeholders. Key stakeholders are very important to the downtown because they're the ones that are getting their livelihood, that are feeding their families, that are depending on the performance of everything they do downtown in order to survive. In that meeting, y'all had about 20 key stakeholders and you found out they wasn't closed-minded, was you? We've missed the boat on this plan, moving forward like it is, because everyone was open-minded to shorten the crosswalks, if you remember, doing stuff on the corners of Court Square, even willing to like, let's put handicap space in the corners of the Court Square because that way you wouldn't lose a lot because you could use that corner there. And there was a lot of great ideas and they're all key stakeholders. It means that they should have more power in what's being said than anybody in the city. Unfortunately, we do like the whole city being involved, but they are feeding their families from this. And I talked to 40 businesses, right? And out of 40 businesses in the downtown, none of them felt like they had any input until you guys sat down. Okay. So I do think it's important. Unfortunately, I wish that I feel like it's all or nothing, unfortunately. So I don't understand why it was this way. I don't know why somebody couldn't take the time to walk the downtown like I did to actually find out these people input and what they felt about what was going on. And I don't know where the missing link was. Had you taken the time or somebody, preferably not me, to do what I'd done, you'll find that these people all feel like there's something that could be done in a positive way. And I just think we missed a boat on it. And I think that it would be great for us if we could move forward and give it some more time and say, what do we do to make these things better? Because you both know they had really good ideas. Unfortunately, the other three, y'all didn't get to see what was being talked about that. And a lot of the people who are sitting in the room tonight were the ones that were sitting in on that meeting too. And I hate y'all missed it because you'll find that nobody was met in the room. It's just when they don't feel like their voice is not being heard in this plan, that's when the division starts. That's when they feel like we don't have a voice anymore. And the people that were there did elect you guys to look out for them and making the best decision for this city. I do appreciate what everybody's done on this council, regardless of what happens tonight. I think you've all done some really good things. I don't know where this is going to go after tonight, but I do tell you, I really appreciate you taking the time to serve the community at this level in which y'all have. I have respect for all y'all, and I wish the best for whatever happens. Thank you.
Chuck. Appreciate it. Is that everyone? Okay, with that being said, then we're going to stop the public comment period, and we're going to talk about it among ourselves for a minute and see if the council wants to do any action on this tonight. So what does everybody think?
can I speak to some
You can
specific
speak to
questions?
anything you want to.
Page.
While you're doing that, let me go over so make sure they know we were listening. Really quick, Mr. Winkle had, he was talking about the roundabouts. Mr. Lineberry, the treescapes and the bump outs. He was in favor of the bump outs. Jan Searle looked at several small towns for 6,000 miles and sees the banner signs and the city center. She was talking about the city center. Mr. Griffin Nathan, Green Level, from Green Level, removed the right of way and price not to exceed. And we were talking about doing the a rendering of the drawing again and set up a price that it not exceed. That was an awfully good suggestion. Linda Barnhill, she was against the roundabouts. Mr. Barnhill was for the roundabouts. Sweet deal. Nathan thanked the council. Thank you, Nathan. We appreciate it. Mr. Richard Wright, depending on us to keep the children safe downtown. And he commented on Chunk Purdue, which I agree with, and Chunk Purdue was a great person. Janae thanked the council and refreshing to see the crowds that we've gathered here together, and we have gathered some crowds, no doubt about that. And Richard asked about the engineering, which Frankie answered that question, that we're starting the engineering right now. And it looks like we're going to be in 6 figures with just the engineering. Mr. Hardin liked Griffin's questions, and if you love it, why change it? And he wanted to increase the flowers in the boxes and use what we got to our advantage. Let's see what else I got. Lisa Kyle, she's almost a square mile. For anybody's information, a square mile is anybody that was born within a half a mile of the courthouse. That's what a square mile would give you. And she was born a little bit further than that. Her father was on the city council, and her father went through this same process. They did not do all the stuff that they had in front of them, but he went through this process also. Ronnie Isley had some good questions. He thought we had some good questions. He was concerned with the loading zone and the parking around Court Square. Jennifer loves Graham, and she talked about the BMOC and compared it to the Burlington Depot being moved. And she wanted us to talk about the phasing of the plan and concern with Marshall and Maple Street and eminent domain. Jason Cox need to investigate the future and stewardship of the downtown area. Courtney was very good. She talked about raising taxes, and I hope we answered her question. And Chuck was talking about the engineering, whether we do our due diligence with the engineering, which we will. With that being said, then I'm going to go to Griffin. He's got a few things to say about the question.
Yeah, per Jennifer's concern that it would be a legal requirement to notify property owners if included in this plan in any form or fashion. I've conferred with our attorney, and that is not his opinion that would be a legal requirement. So ethically, that's a decision to make. It's a plan on a shelf. We all agree that DOT is not going to do that roundabout in the Owsley situation. It's not ideal, but it's not legally required to disclose either. And as far as the comments Jennifer made on phasing, that section of the whole document begins by saying this chapter seeks to guide the city through proposed phasing, implementation, and funding processes. And intentionless and careful planning, negotiating, design, funding, and construction can take several years to materialize. Again, nothing is actualized in this plan or implemented or happening, to be literal. She also referenced the additional the roads I suggested for truck routes. The language in the document on the screen says additional planning and design should consider all alternative routes for truck and vehicle traffic through downtown, in addition to those roads, which are already mentioned in the plan. So what that does is expand it to a wider thinking of truck routes, of other routes, of vehicle traffic around. There's been thoughts of if they could go on the interstate, take other routes. That by no means limits it to the roads that are listed in the bulleted point. It says in addition to that. And per Chuck's concern about the stakeholders and being a part of design, this is a preliminary vision. This is not the design phase. This goes through phasing, engineering, and further design that can implement these concepts or could ignore them. This is a tool in a toolkit. It's not a blueprint for actual work to be done. This is something on the shelf in the toolbox that we can use or not use. So that's how I look at the things, the concerns. They're valuable concerns, but that, to me, that those can be remedied and are.
All right, guys, anybody else?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me expand on a little bit on what Griffin was saying. In addition to this being a plan and that we have in our toolkit that's put on a shelf, in addition to, and we've said this numerous times in the meetings, when we start to pull down the plan, if and when you pull down this plan, then we go through detail and then we go through public meetings. And that's a time where we start to get detail oriented, and all these things of concern come back in each of those phases. There is definitely going to be open meetings. People can speak to them. When we get to detail, everybody gets a chance to speak on that detail. It's not something that is done and finished. We are not passing that tonight. We are passing a conceptual plan, and that's all. Thank you.
I do, Mayor. I've got something I'd like to say as well. And so just adding on to what's already been said, I think some important points that were brought up this evening was the fact that this is a conceptual plan and it's going to be almost impossible to satisfy every desire. Everyone's voice in the city of Graham, including the stakeholders, is important. But we can't put a value on whose voice brings the most importance. Everyone's important to us, and we must listen to everyone as a community. We must take all the input that we've gathered through this process for all year that this has been going on in 2019 and use that input to guide what we have in front of us tonight. Again, I think the most important thing is the idea of trying to address every single individual's concern is an impossibility in this process. We must put together what we think is the best fit for the community, listening to everyone in the community and putting that together. I think what we've got in front of us is a very good working document plan for our future.
I'm still on the other side. I don't see us putting in writing something that we're not going to do. I just don't see that. Chip, what do you think?
I don't see it either. We got, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know which, we have a DOT highway running right down the middle of our city. And we're not going to be able to do anything, Highway 87, Main Street, whatever you want to call it, without DOT's blessings. And
are you arguing for it or against it?
I'm against it. And as far as the truck route, I'm not saying we put trucks on Marshall Street or Maple Street, or I'm not saying or Gilbert, but the state traffic engineer has said they would come in here and help us with a signed truck route. And I've said it many times right here that the best way to go is off Elm Street or left on Hardin Street or Highway 54 down the interstate, come up the interstate over to 87 and out 87. Now, I understand why they don't want to go down the interstate, but hey, that's a lot better than put them right down through downtown. And if they're told that's where they got to go there. So that's my take.
What would you do with the change in poundage? You've got 80,000.
Well, everything, let me explain this. Everything is 80,000 pounds. Everything. No, sir. Everything is 80,000 pounds. When you hit interstate, that's 80,000 pounds. If you 80,001, you're getting a ticket. Now, 87, Elm Street, 49, whatever, these primary routes, they get a variance. I think it's a 10% variance. So technically they could, if they weigh 85 or 86, 87,000 pounds, they probably won't get a ticket.
Is that why the log trucks avoid?
That's why they avoid the interstate. But if we tell them you got to go to the interstate, I suggest they get them some scales out in the field and be under 80,000 pounds.
Good answer.
I mean, I don't know why we're letting them dictate to us. And that is the best, to me, that is the best truck route that can be. And I mean, these trucks at, I don't know, 82, 85, some of them may even be pushing 90, 92,000 pounds. I don't know. But Elm Street, I'm going to use a landmark here that's, I've been here a long time. Y'all going to hear this now, but at Collins and Aikman, they come straight across Hardin Street, up Elm, around Court Square. Elm Street isn't made to take that kind of traffic. And it will show in our streets and it's gonna cost us money. I mean, we've talked about it many times. We're way behind in our resurfacing and our street infrastructure. And it's gonna cost us money if we keep letting them come up through here. And
Breaking down the court
yeah,
square also.
well, it is. And I have talked to DOT and I don't know when they're gonna do it. I've asked them to pull these 2 trenches, ditches, whatever they are, coming south off of the court square. Now that we got the 2 boxes up there, to fill that in so that don't look so bad. So we don't have a roller coaster ride in court square.
Does anybody else have anything to add?
I would like to just say, and I think we're talking about your concerns, Chip. Does the comment actually that is being considered here tonight, that additional planning and design should consider all alternative routes for truck and vehicle traffic through our downtown?
I said when I first started speaking, I'm not saying that we're planning to push it anywhere. I'm just saying the best place to put it is keeping on DOT highways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what that language does, I mean, if you don't, I hope you agree, is it allows DOT to look at what that's going to be, which puts it in there, but you know, they're just say, look, is there an alternative route? They may say no. We're gonna keep it the way it is.
The state traffic engineer said he would help us get a signed truck route.
Yeah.
However, one left turn now, and I did talk to DOT. They are looking at coming off Hardin Street, left on Elm Street. It is hard for those trucks to make it. So they are looking, they are doing traffic counts.
Yeah.
And maybe take that left turn lane off of Hardin Street onto Elm, take that off where you can't turn left, and you'll have to go down to Marshall.
Gotcha.
There at Forgotten Roads and take a left to get over, which would be very simple. They could just come down and get on Elm Street right there.
So
They are
looking at all alternative routes to potentially move any traffic out
Yeah,
and give it
well,
alternate routes. With that,
I think, well, you can't put them on Marshall Street because there's
Well,
a 5-ton signage on that.
sure, and I think we're starting to get into the engineering phase of a conceptual plan. But would that idea of just looking at all alternative routes for any possibility, they may say none.
Yeah,
They may
if
say
they
there's
can.
none, and
But-
there's none available, and that's what
Well,
we'll be faced with.
If we tell them they can't come up Elm Street, they're gonna have to find a route.
Right. I don't think working with DOT and telling them to not look at certain options, just allow every option available. is
I agree
the
with
way
that.
to- yeah.
I guess that sounds kind of hard
Yeah.
to tell them they can't come up Elm Street, but they really shouldn't come up Elm Street.
No, I don't.
They
I
really
don't-
should not come
I
up
don't
Elm
think that's
Street.
a reality, but I don't want to restrict them from looking at all possible options. Would you be?
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, but I'm just giving you the best option there is.
Yep.
So I'm a little confused
On.
because we've actually opened up in our statement, Tip. We've opened up in the statement that we're looking at any and every option, and there may be none, but we're looking at any and every option, and that's what you're agreeing to, but not agreeing to. That's, I mean, there's nothing about this that says
Some of
that
these
we're
options-
taking it
Some of these
anywhere.
options really aren't options. I mean, they're out there, but they're not options for truck traffic.
Then
They're
that's
just
what
not
we're
options.
looking at. That's what
But I
makes
mean,
this a
you know,
conceptual plan. That's
You
what
can
we're
be
looking at.
open-minded and say, we'll look at any option. I can agree with that, but
Yeah.
common sense tells you there's a lot of these options are not options.
And that's exactly what we're saying, is that we're leaving all these options out there to say whatever the option is, that's the whole point.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we beat this horse pretty bad. So I'm gonna move to you and ask you what you want to do.
I would like to see us move forward with the plan in front of us, with the adjustment that Mr. Kimry's made to bullet point 4, eliminating around Court Square, and then adding a watermark over the roundabout on South Main Street, anywhere it appears that says roundabout not advised.
You do that instead of paying for another conceptual. drawing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the problem that you're going to get, that sounds easy in theory, but you hand this document back to these folks that have computed traffic amounts and things. The roundabout affects, as I said last meeting, what's upstream what's in Court Square, what's other places. It's not a matter of, I don't think you're going to find that it's that easy. And I'd like to put this thing to bed. We've been talking about it for 6 months personally.
So read your motion again.
I will make a motion that we approve the plan as presented and amend the bullet point, the fourth bullet point on page 149 to end after the word splash park and omit around Court Square with additional changes of adding a watermark over any diagram of the roundabout on South Main Street and McCaden Street that says roundabout not advised.
Yep.
That's it.
All right, I've got a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2. Do you want to state your reason?
Kind of stated it in my previous.
I guess I
comment.
did too. I'm pulling with Paul Hardin. I think if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a couple of minutes and we'll come back here at 25 till 9 and continue, okay?
Yes, yes, yes.
You can mute.
Gosh, I've been
All right, we ready to start back again, Chipper?
And he don't want to be in no more.
He will. Yes, he will. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we've got requests and petitions from the citizen. Encroachment license agreement request by John Xing for property located on 139 West Elm Street. Aaron, I think you're handling this for us, please.
Yes, sir. The name and the requested action and the address should all look very familiar. John Xing, back in August of 2019, came before, requested from council that it be approved to have an encroachment license agreement for a grease trap at this property. He's coming before council again, requesting for the installation on the sidewall of the building located at 139 West Elm for a gas meter to serve a future restaurant. City staff has met and concurs with the proposed location of the gas meter. The Historic Resources Commission approval is not required for this installation. Staff does recommend approval.
Questions for the staff. Griffin, I think we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, and I'm sure I know the answer to this, but the spray painted coming out, this will be not flush, but attached to the wall to some degree.
Yeah.
It'll only come out 5-6 inches, something like that.
I'm not sure exactly how far out it's coming, but if you look at what's around Court Square now, I'm imagining it'd be similar to what's affixed to the walls that are gas meters that are currently around there now.
Okay, like I said, I'm sure I know. And what we see to the left there is generally used as a smoking area. Is that of concern with this being a gas line, or was that conversation had at all?
Not sure if that conversation was had. That is something that I hope that someone has thought of prior to putting a gas meter in place, but I'm sure that that's something that the gas company is definitely going to be aware of before they do anything there.
This was the location that the gas company recommended at
Okay.
that spot, and they have been to the spot and made the recommendation.
Yeah, we don't know exactly where it's going, but they're going to go where they determine the best location. They've already been out to the site.
Okay.
Chipper.
No question.
Lee.
I do. So Aaron, suppliers for natural gas have to have or need access to those meters. Explain to me, moving forward, it is the city's, if my understanding is correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's the city's desire to have all gas meters available and accessible, as well as the provider itself to be able to access those gas meters. So my question is, we're looking at individual property owners when the gas meter itself is the property of the supplier. At what point do we put some type of blanket encroachment with the supplier so that we can get the meters out of the buildings where we can't get to them during a fire and shut off the gas? Because that is the equipment that is owned by the supplier, but yet we're granting the encroachment to the property owner.
That's a very good point. I think that's something we'll probably have to address.
Because really the property owner has no say-so over that meter coming or going.
No, you're correct. That's actually the property of the gas company.
Correct.
Not the.
Shouldn't that encroachment be a blanket encroachment agreement with the provider moving forward so that we can get these gas meters out from inside of buildings?
That's something we can do.
The gas.
Fire department have something else to say about that?
There's
They
building
want them
code.
outside.
I mean,
They want them outside so they can be
Yeah.
shut off.
Shouldn't the fire department?
Also, many of our utilities formerly operated under franchise agreements. They do have some state statutory authority to operate within our right-of-ways, and in exchange, we get utilities franchise taxes. I won't swear that this is the case, but your Duke Powers, your Piedmont Natural Gases formerly operated under those franchise agreements, which are no longer in effect for cities, but they do have statewide, some statewide authority.
So what would you suggest moving forward? Because what you're basically telling me is the utility has a right to put the meter there. Now we're asking the property owner to sign an encroachment agreement to allow for a gas meter that they don't own to be put on city property.
Can we give Duke, I mean,
Technically, it's
People-
DOT.
I mean, I'm just trying to figure all this out, guys.
but technically it's DOT, but like Piedmont Natural Gas now is Duke Energy. And they have blanket encroachments with DOT where they got,
Well, this is City of Graham there.
that's true.
Well,
But
no.
Well, they would have it with the city
Yeah.
as well.
but it looks like we could have an ordinance or something that these things have to
I'll
be
get back
outside
to
the
you in a
building.
minute. Okay.
Well, I think building code, fire code may prescribe those
That's what I'm saying.
regulations.
yeah.
And we've adopted the recent versions of those codes.
That don't make a lot of sense to have a gas meter inside a building.
And we've got them
And they're,
all in the downtown.
they happen. Yep.
Yeah. And we desperately need to get them out of the buildings, but we, you know, it sounds,
Well, it does, but they're grandfathered in.
They're
over the
grandfathered in,
years.
yeah.
They were put there like when it was Western Auto, all those gas meters.
Yeah.
Where the verdict is
Yeah.
now. We're inside.
now, see, I understand, you know, a grease trap, that's the property of the owner of the building. That's their property. Basically, we're giving an encroachment. But we're trying to give an encroachment to property that is not the property owner's possessions. How can we go forward with this and put something in play that's going to work in every situation without burdening every property owner to come get an encroachment for something that's not theirs on city property?
So you're looking at an encroachment allowing.
For the provider.
Gas.
Yes, for the provider.
That's who owns it.
That's who owns it. It's their encroachment. It's not really the property owner.
You got the person that owns the building, Zangocious in this matter. You got Zen, who's the lessee. You got the city of Graham, who's right away, and then you got
Yeah.
natural gas.
Yeah.
There may be benefit in revisiting the existing encroachment language in the Code of Ordinances to effectively exempt with certain conditions, gas and electrical meters.
Okay.
And
And I think that's what Frankie was kind of alluding to say that's somewhat kind of granted to a certain, but you know, I don't want to burden every property owner with having to come to get an encroachment for something that's not there. So
yeah, Nathan and I had talked about that whenever this had come up before us, and we were like, I'm sure we would have preferred for this not to have been something we brought before council each time something like this comes up. Unfortunately, we didn't have anything to speak to it. So, you know, for it to happen, we brought it before council, but I think revisiting the language to address it will probably be the best way to catch anything like this going forward.
well, I'm just one vote, but I would love to think that we would consider some different options. This seems to be very burdensome for us to look at it this way.
It can be.
Okay.
I'm gonna let Melody ask her questions, and then I'm gonna suggest that we go ahead with this one and then have the staff revisit it for the next one.
Well, now, I think the problem that I have is kind of, this is a private property owner who's signing on to an encroachment. Now, there's going to be insurance requirements. We're going to burden this property owner with something that's not theirs, and they're going to have to insure it.
True, but right now we need to get this.
Well, Frankie's
No.
saying that right now it can probably be allowed as it is without any encroachment agreement from the property owner because we have a utility franchise agreement with providers. So can we just retract this and let this go until we get something further? Because I don't want to require them to have maintain insurance and go through this, all the requirements here, $1 million in liability insurance as the city, that's not theirs, guys. I mean, it's just not their property. We're asking them to insure something that's not theirs.
Or could we combine it with the previous encroachment and let
Yeah.
it be under one umbrella? That
I'm
way
okay
you've
with
got
that. That would
one-
not put any further burden on the property owner.
I'm fine as long as we settle this tonight.
Okay, so it can move forward.
Yes.
I agree with that 100%. I do.
Okay, so Frankie, I'll give you a couple of minutes to write us down some language that we can all agree on. Melody, do you want to answer some questions? It's your turn.
No, the only thing that if we're going to put that gas on out there. Sure, notify the next door bar because they do act.
They do.
Yeah.
They will. They'll see them there. But you're right. I'm gonna let Frankie write up something that we can go ahead with this, and then we'll do something with it. We'll let the staff look at all options in the next couple of weeks. Y'all bear with us just a second.
It's got a final survey and then it's got insurance and all
yeah.
that good stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So Frankie's actually writing us a motion is what I think.
Yeah.
Does anybody from the floor want to speak on this while you see what we're doing? We just don't like the idea of them having to carry $1 million worth of insurance on a meter that belongs to the gas company. So we'll put it back on the gas company, but we have to write a motion that allows us to do that. So we want to settle it tonight so that they can go on with their business. I just asked if anybody wants to speak on it, so I don't guess so. That was a good question.
Oh, thanks, Mayor.
I hadn't thought about it, just because this is the normal way we do it.
Yeah.
That is normal. It's
It's their
Piedmont or Duke Energy.
Oh, absolutely.
gas
They'll come and
meter.
take it. You'll find out who owns it when they come to take it.
Yeah.
They can cut it off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really and truly, it should be.
That way, any application moving forward will.
Or they can get an indemnity.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes.
That's my best
Okay.
work under pressure.
Okay, all the questions been asked? Okay, I will make the motion then. I move to authorize the city manager and the city attorney to amend the encroachment license agreement with John Xing for a proposed gas meter at 139 West Elm Street as identified by the submitted photos with the following condition: provide city a survey to confirm use of public space. Okay. Did everybody get that?
So hold on a minute. Mayor, could you, being this is on the fly, could you read that one more time, please?
I move to authorize the city manager and the city attorney to amend the encroachment license agreement with John Xing for a proposed gas meter at 139 West Elm Street as identified by the submitted photos with the following conditions: provide final survey to confirm use of public space. Did that cover what we wanted to cover?
And final survey would also include the grease trap as well, on the final as-built survey. And they could include the meter there also. I'll second that. I think that,
Did you want to include
Satisfied.
as built in there, or you just,
I know, I think that takes care of it. I think
Okay.
that,
does everybody understand where we're at?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with it also. So I've made the motion. I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. All right, I'm gonna send that back to Darcy, so she'll have that. Deal. Thank you, Frankie.
You're welcome.
The pressure. Okay. Next, we have recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Board. First, a public hearing on CR 1902 Albany Business application by J. Norman Thomas for a rezoning to permit duplexes on a small office space on a parcel located 109 Albany Street. Nathan, you're handling this for us, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. There is a typo in the staff report. It is a conditional business that the applicant applied for and a conditional business that is recommended to be approved by staff. The CR, I apologize, that was my fault. The conditional rezoning versus a conditional residential versus a conditional business. I got confused as I was writing the application, but it is a CB as applied for. The last piece is that this is the first conditional residential that we have as the City of Graham done since a change has been made to the statute that allows us to do so. And therefore, the applicant must agree in writing to any conditions prior to those conditions being binding. So it's my recommendation that the council have a motion and a second, but before the vote is taken, they poll the applicant to confirm that he is willing to acquiesce to those conditions. If so, sign his name binding himself, at which time the council may have a vote upon it. If the council has a vote before the applicant signs, any conditions that the council may apply could not be binding because the applicant would not have previously agreed to them in writing. The applicant is for 2 duplex dwellings for a total of 4 dwellings and a commercial property to be used for offices, perhaps a contractor's office or a small retail establishment.
All right, good questions for staff. Chipper, start with you, please.
No questions at this time.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. So Nathan, the planning board suggested a condition for this conditional rezoning. That's a lot of conditions there. Talk to us about that. I think it dealt with the 3-foot fence that they recommended for us to consider as a condition on the western portion of the property.
Yes, sir. There were 2 conditions that the planning board made. One was that the parcel be considered a land use classification 3 for the purposes of future landscaping, and that a safety fence at least 3 feet in height be installed on the western property line.
Okay. And the land use suggestion for a condition was a staff recommendation. And then recommended by planning board to continue, just to correct. So the planning board's additional condition was the 3-foot safety fence along the western border.
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Melody, questions, please.
No, so we only had one condition from the planning board that we're putting in here, the 3-foot fence on the west side
And consider class 3 for your.
and considered class 3. So there are 2.
2.
Okay, thank you.
Griffin, questions?
Yeah, Nathan, generally describe what a land use classification 3 requires or suggests, just.
So the land use classification is the guide that allows us to determine how much landscaping needs to be between this structure and an adjacent structure. In this circumstance, the land use classification of the unified business development behind it is a 3. Therefore, it would be a 3 next to a 3, which would minimize as much as possible the landscaping requirements for either parcel were it to redevelop in the future. One example of that is the AutoZone and the O'Reillys, which are next to each other. They have the minimum landscaping requirement between those 2 structures. The opposite end of that, a single family home is a land use classification 1, and then a junkyard would be a land use classification 5. That requires a type A yard, which is up to, a minimum width of 40 feet wide and has probably 10 times the plant material in it that a type D yard, which would be required here, has.
So that's mainly affecting the borders, not throughout the parcel, that's the separation?
Yeah, it would only come into play if the parcel behind it or this parcel were at some point in the future to redevelop. And it would minimize that which is required to be bushes and shrubs between the commercial property and the existing whatever it is that could happen here.
Okay, and I didn't see it in the planning and zoning minutes, but the reasoning, the logic for the safety fence from the board was,
I believe there
loosely
was discussion about the truck access to the rear of the old supermarket.
And is there reason to specify materials or anything of that nature, safety fence? What in your estimation would that be?
I would allow a lot of things. Barbed wire would not be considered the safety fence.
All right. So with that being said, you need to walk us through this thing. So is the applicant here?
Yes, sir.
Come up, sir, if you would. Would you mind answering questions if the council has any? Lee, we'll start with
Mr.
you.
Mayor, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I may be the oldest speaker you have, but I'm not after anything.
Well, I've got peanuts and grapes.
I'll be glad to answer any questions. You were not here at the last meeting when we were turned down for a different person. The person who wanted to purchase the property applied for residential, and it was not passed. And thanks to Mr. Page and his citizen friendly attitude, he and I talked about this and discussed this at length, and he led me through this process of trying to get this done. I represent basically my uncle's estate, who owned the property at 209, and we're requesting your consideration for the conditional rezoning, basically so that we can get back to where the property was originally. These buildings, other than the metal building, are in real disrepair, and they were single bedroom duplexes, 2 different buildings, and they were built for that originally, and because of my uncle's health, they've been deteriorated and hadn't been rented in quite a while. So it was necessary to do this to get it back. What we're after is to sell this property to someone who will rebuild these 2 duplexes and give single family, single bedroom housing to the families.
Before these guys ask a question, may I ask, are you all right with the 2 conditions?
Very much so. We discussed that, Mr. Page and I discussed that prior to the planning meeting, and I'm certainly, the fence does not bother me whatsoever. There is children in the house on the other side without the fence, but it certainly wouldn't be a detriment. And my idea is not a chain link fence, but something in a nice looking wooden fence to go around there that would prevent that.
Well, let me go to Lee. You got any questions?
I do. So I understand that a fence is something that you were not opposed to. The planning board recommended a 3-foot in height fence. Would there be any opposition to that fence being a little taller than 3 foot? 3 foot is a very small fence. And from a security or safety standpoint, it does not provide too much of that at 3 foot. Any opposition to a 4-foot fence in that application to be sure that there's safety provided for that parcel? Okay.
None whatsoever. If you make a 4-foot fence, you can take an 8-foot post and make a 4-foot fence out of it.
You also have an option if the land use for the landscaping is what it is, that you can go to a 5-foot opaque fence and also reduce the amount of landscaping required. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's permitted for a type 3 to a type 3. I think that's only if you have an A or B or a C yard.
To go with a no.
So the type D yard does not have the note regarding the wall. It's all the other ones except that one.
So if this was conditional residential, it would be different, but it's conditional business.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, great. Super. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melody, I'm sorry.
No, sir, I don't.
No questions.
I was going to touch on making a 4-foot fence. Lee's exactly right. It should be at least a 4-foot fence.
So before we go any further, are you okay with a 4-foot fence and considered class 3?
Yes, sir. That's fine.
Then we need to sign the paper that.
I have no objections to signing the conditions either.
You changed it to 4-foot for us, Nathan?
It's done, sir.
Yes, I'm fixing to. Do I need to make it on there? Okay. All right, I'm moving you to page 49. I move the application be approved with the following conditions: a safety fence at least 4 foot in height be installed on the western property line, and it be considered a 3 a class 3
land use classification.
land use classification. Okay. Y'all get that? All right with that.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
Do we need a conditional statement? I mean, other statement and compliance statement.
Both consistent with the 2035 plan and then reasonable and in the public interest.
Gotcha.
Not on here. Okay, it is right there. I'm sorry. So I got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Thank you, sir. Good luck with it.
Thank
We're
you.
pulling for
And I certainly appreciate the effort that Mr. Page put forth.
We did not address the condition, and the consistency.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that the application be approved with the following conditions: that the parcel be considered land use classification 3 for the purposes of future landscaping, and a safety fence at least 4 feet in height be installed on the western property line. Yeah. Got it. The application is consistent with the Graham 2035 Comprehensive Plan, and this action is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. In accordance with policies 2.2.1 and 5.1.1 and strategies 4.3.1 and 5.2.1, this rezoning will permit additional density upon a lot in a walkable region of town.
Thank you, sir. I got a motion. Need a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Certainly appreciate it.
I'll get this back to you in a minute. Would you pass that? Know what it was? It was written right there. I know, I just slid it right on by me. Thank y'all.
I don't believe I told you that I'm Norman Thomas at 42 Alloway Place in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
I had your name right here. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Okay, next we go to B, public hearing, SUP 1903 Cherry Charter School. And this request has been withdrawn. Nathan, you want to give us the details on that?
Not to take any time, Jim Ray sent an email on October 5th at 11 and said, please accept this email as notification to rescind our special use permit application for the Cherry Lane School site property, and gave the GPIN that was previously submitted.
Okay, with that, I need a motion to have the request withdrawn.
So move.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. C, we have a public hearing, AM 1905, residential rear setbacks, application by Rocky Long for a amendment to the residential rear setback. Nathan, you're handling this for us?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Rocky Long has applied to reduce the requirement for the rear yard setback from 20% to 20 feet. And I have both a draft of the existing and proposed table. The planning board did make one recommendation to allow the applicant to abide by the 20% rule if they could prove that it was less than the 20 feet through a note to the area height and yard regulations as note 11.
Questions for the staff? Melody, please.
No, thank you.
Griffin, please.
No, he answered my one question.
Okay. Chipper?
No question.
Lee?
No questions, Mayor.
Good deal. And you are?
I am Rocky Long, and I reside at 1867 Challenge Drive in Graham, North Carolina.
Thank you for being here, sir.
So I want to first of all, thank the city council. I'm sorry, I'm probably not as exciting as some of the folks that were here earlier, but the proposal to amend a section of the Graham Development Ordinances, which it specifically is on the board up there, was Division 12, Section 10.245, as described on pages 91, 92, and 93. And what that is the chart that he showed you, which gives you the residential setbacks and the business setbacks and the commercial setbacks. The request, as he said, is to reduce the residential from 20% to a set of 20 feet. Please note that all the rest of the codes in Graham is 20 feet except for one, which is 10 feet. And I think that was the B1, and it's 10 feet, but everything else is 20 feet. I researched 8 other ordinance requirements for our surrounding areas because we are in competition for trying to get people to come to Graham and live here. And as you can see by the chart, only of the 8 I did, 2 of them were at 25 feet and 1 was at 10 feet. The 25 was Elon College, and they had so many crazy things in there that I should have just left it out. Burlington is 25. Everything else is 20 feet, including Mebane, which we are very close to, both demographics, size, and density in the residential areas. The 20% currently used as a moving target. I think that's the problem. In some cases, it would allow a setback as little as 16 feet. And that would be found in a residential lot called R7, which is a 7,000 square foot lot, 84 by 84. You take the 8.4 at 16 feet, 8 inches. So what I've done is I've done 2 drawings for you to show you how this would help the homeowners and also help the city of Graham. And so
I apologize. Those were truncated for the city council's version.
okay. Well, basically the drawing will show you that in my lot in Hideaway Village is 80 by 130. 80 feet being the minimum for a 9,000 R9 square foot area. You have to have 80 feet wide, and mine's 30 feet deep. That's pretty typical for that area. So I have a 26-foot rear setback as we have it right now. If you change this to allow the 20 feet, that gives me 4% larger buildable area. Buildable area is your 2 8-foot sides, your rear setback, and your front setback. And as your lots get bigger, that number gets bigger. And the one thing that the caveat would do also to change that was if you allow me to build something 4% bigger on my lot that I already own without changing anything, is you do have a little extra money in the till from taxes. So currently what I'm trying to do is build an addition to my house, which is just an open porch. It's a covered porch that I can't build unless I can get 20 feet. But I could build that same building if the HOA would approve it. That's the one caveat for everything. But I could build that building, and it could be, I won't bore you with all the details, but it could be 421 square feet, 5 feet from the back line, on the sideline, 35 feet tall. And that's per code. That building can be a garage, it can be a studio, it can be a number of things. So, you know, without the drawings, I can't really, you know, show you what we're talking about here. But once again, I thank you for your time and consideration. I think this will help both Graham and the homeowners. To me, there are no negative impacts to this.
Would you mind answering questions?
I certainly would answer.
Let's see, we'll start with Griffin, please.
I don't guess I followed your example of the building it to within 5 feet and flush with the property line and 35 feet tall.
You can build a, you'd have to bring that up for you, which one it is.
So you can build an accessory structure. The side and rear yard setback, I believe, is 5 foot. And then we don't have any regulation that the accessory structure must be smaller than the primary structure. It just has to be ancillary to it.
So you're saying hypothetically, if it was not connected to the house?
Yes.
Gotcha.
And actually, it is governed by the square footage of your backyard, your required backyard. In my case, the required backyard was the 26 feet times the 80 feet wide, which is 421 square feet.
But it becomes a hindrance when it's attached.
It can't do it if it's attached, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Okay, I didn't make that distinction.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, I'm
All right.
Yep.
Chipper, please.
No questions.
Lee, questions?
No questions, Mayor.
Melody, questions?
Comment for Nathan. Now, this is one of those examples where we've been talking about that we have ordinances that are 50 years plus and that we're still operating under that needed to be changed. Is that not correct? This was one of those items.
I think that the 20% lot depth is likely to be one of the older portions of our ordinances that is likely a remnant of when almost all lots were laid out on a grid. And it was very easy to say, oh, it's 20% of the depth of the lot. It becomes quite difficult to calculate. I received a lot today that looked like I don't know, it had one leg off the side that was 400 feet long near the rear. And what was the rear of that lot and how is 20% calculated for that lot? With 20 feet, you just draw a line and say, there you go. So this very much, I think, streamlines and brings us into a more enforceable, easier to understand ordinance that also, in this case, allows for more buildable area on an individual lot. and very much more in line with, as you can see, the neighboring jurisdictions and current planning practice.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Does anybody else want to speak on this? Not, then we'll close the public hearing. We'll talk about it among ourselves. What does everybody think?
I'm good with it.
I think it's excellent.
I do too. Lee?
Oh, yes,
Okay with that?
yes.
Okay, with that being said, I need to move you to page 59, and I'll ask you for a motion from the floor.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move that the text amendment be approved with an additional clause that with a note to 10.245 to allow the applicant to request approval from the planning department for a 20% rear yard setback in lieu of the 20-foot requirement, that the text amendment is consistent with the Graham 2035 comprehensive plan, and that this action is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons.
Does everybody understand the motion?
That in strategy 2.3.1 as well as policy 4.3.1 recommends reducing setback requirements for residential lots.
Again, does everybody understand the motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's 20 foot and or 20%. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay, with that, I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Mr. Long, good luck with it. We're pulling for you, sir. All right, next we have first reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Graham amending various sections related to boards and commissions of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Graham. Frankie, are you handling this?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the Boards and Commissions Task Force, what you have before you is the first reading of an ordinance that amends various sections as it relates to boards and commissions. Mostly general in nature, but some specific to a few boards. So I'm going to just read from the staff report as I am conveying this from another board, and Melody, who is heading up that effort, may chime in to add any additional detail. So the Volunteer Boards and Commissions Task Force commenced the study of the boards and commissions in July. The task force has met on several occasions and have started to formulate recommendations. Among the first recommendations from the task force is an ordinance that provides general regulation of our boards and commissions. The task force identified that the city currently lacks a general ordinance to guide our boards and commissions, leaving a requirement for specific legislation for each current and future board. It should be noted that the proposed general ordinance is silent to residency requirements, leaving residency requirements to specific ordinances. Also, the general ordinance would allow for subcommittees such as the Hall of Fame Board, in which the commission also recommends being a function of the Recreation and Parks Commission rather than an independent board. Moving from the general ordinance, general guidance to specific, the task force has also identified amendments specific to other boards, and they're outlined as the tree board is requesting amendments to increase membership to 7 total and establish a city council liaison. The Graham Historical Museum Advisory Board is requesting an amendment to codify in our ordinances the establishment of the board and require members to be residents of the city. Previously, that board by resolution allowed ETJ membership. And finally, the Recreation and Parks Commission, they're seeking in this amendment to clarify that there are 7 members and a city council liaison, and that the voting eligibility of the city council liaison, there is no voting eligibility of the city council liaison. That has been a point of confusion in the past. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Sir, Chip, questions, please.
No questions.
Lee, questions.
I do. So Frankie, under section 2 of the committees, I noticed that it states in here may establish any temporary or permanent committees. Could you allude on that a little bit?
I'm going to refer to them as subcommittees.
Okay.
So the council is a public body, and so are the planning board, tree board. Those are public bodies as well. And currently there exists no ordinance by the city that would enable those boards to have a subcommittee. Let's say the tree board wanted to have a study of maple trees and wanted to have 2 or 3 members to investigate that and report back to the tree board. This would enable them to do so if they so choose. Probably the most common reference that I can give you is the Hall of Fame Committee. somewhere along the line, that board was pulled out and treated independent, when I think traditionally or historically it had been a function of the Recreation Commission. So that would be an example of a subcommittee that this ordinance would allow your boards and commissions to do that.
So was there any reason that the term subcommittee was not used instead of committee?
I think we were trying to keep the boards and commissions as the council appointed board, and then using the term committee for boards that.
An internal or subcommittee?
Yeah, subcommittees, yes. Those words are probably interchangeable and synonymous, but that's our stab at it.
Okay. All right. Under section 2, voting advocacy and monetary interest, there's a statement that says, as far as a conflict of interest from a monetary standpoint, either direct or indirect. One could argue that many decisions you make have indirect influence. So give me some thought as to why that was even put in.
The city council has adopted code of ethics for the council. You've adopted missions, visions, and values for employees. There are no requirements, general requirements for conduct of appointed board members. And I believe this language was borrowed from another jurisdiction. So I can't comment on the language itself. I actually don't recall typing it myself.
Is that the language from the School of Government, our conflict of interest stuff too? It says something similar.
It has been looked over and it's been approved by our
Yeah.
attorneys. That's the part that they were given.
Indirect interest? One could make an argument that everyone has an indirect interest.
It was borrowed from the city of Brooklyn. That I can tell you. That's where it came from.
I would not want to see a future committee or board in the city of Graham oppose someone from voting who has an indirect interest and try to describe what an indirect interest is.
I think what in the reading of some of the background stuff, I think the indirect was kind of alluding to a family member having a direct interest. The person doing the voting may have an indirect interest.
Now,
if they were voting, it was to the benefit of something that was a direct interest to a family member. They were going to be getting an indirect interest.
whereas immediate family members for an elected official, that is a direct. If a immediate family member, is there any monetary gains made off of a vote? That is a direct and not an indirect. Is that's what I have read before, and that's.
It could be. I'm just kind of going by memory, and I didn't look at it real close before I got.
Sure. Okay.
But the only thing I'm going to tell you is that was borrowed directly from the city of Burlington and their boards and commissions, looking at their conflicts of interest statement. So.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Melody
No, sir, not at this time.
and Griffin.
No, sir.
I want to move you to section 2, the nominations to office. I'm not a fan of term limits on volunteer boards just because we have a hard enough time getting people on there. And why would you kick a good member off because of a term limit?
I'm not like that myself. I do like limiting of 2 boards instead of 3, 4, and whatever. I do like limiting of 2
The
boards.
number of boards
Yes,
persons.
yes, I do
I'm
like
not,
that,
I'm
but
not against that, and I'm
yeah,
fine with
I
that.
agree with you
But
on
I look back at Bob Moore, that was the planning and zoning chair for
Yeah.
30 years.
like if you look at Parks and Recreation Commission Board,
Hey, Cook.
Jay Cook, yeah, that, to me, that'd be a big loss.
Let me also state that there are boards like the Hall of Fame where we do use that 2 years, you're off a year. They like it very much, and it adds some new life, but it allows that person to come back on in 1 year to be reelected back to that position again. So what they're saying, other boards and other locations, take a look at that. It adds the opportunity. What you're also seeing in here is that if there is no one available, you still have the option to continue with that person on a yearly basis until you get someone qualified to fill those positions. So all those things are still in here, but it's in an effort to keep things fresh and to get new ideas and so forth on these boards, because we know that there are people that are out there at this point. We saw that this past year, who are ready to be put on boards, but they cannot get in. So this just allows an opportunity for the possibility of someone else to get an opportunity to serve on a board. Again, allows your good members, what they've found when we've used it with Hall of Fame, is it adds wonderful stability with folks who have been there. They're able to come back, but it also adds that great new life to what they're doing.
That was well said, but I've still, that would be a problem for me.
I like the work that Melody's done. She's done a lot of work on this thing. That's the only
And
thing
the rest of the
I
members.
disagree in the plan is doing that, but everything else.
Okay.
Go to, and I had this in my notes, but I'd go to Frankie and or Melody. Do we have enough interest and names and applicants rolling in the hopper? There's also language, I'm sure where the application can only stay current for a certain amount of time.
For a year. What we're seeing tonight is simply the ordinances section of this. What will follow that board doesn't have to approve is actually the procedures and guidelines manual. And that's where it will actually state procedures and guidelines and how we act upon those. And right now the recommendation is looking at the 1-year time period for staying in, which is the law of what they have to stay in. So an application stays in the hopper for a year, and then you must reapply for those positions.
Well,
That's actually law. That would be put into the guidelines.
That's the only concern I have with this too. I'm not sure we're here yet with having enough by displacing somebody that's a valuable member and taking the only person that's applied just because that application's there.
To answer your question, Griffin, some boards we have reserve file. Some boards we have no interest.
And to point out that the city council still has the discretion of removing someone when they apply to renew or for an additional term.
All right, let's go to the floor. Does anybody want to speak on it? Dean, did you say you want to speak on this? Come up, if you would, please, sir. Give us your name and address, please.
Dean Ward, 1143 Challenge Drive. And I only have just one issue that I want to talk about. And it's not really an issue, it's just a foresight that maybe it has been addressed, maybe it hadn't been addressed, is term limits as it stands right now. There's 3 people that would come off in the same year that come up for renewal in the 3-year term. So you would be taking 3 people off of the Board of Adjustments. That's the biggest board that's going to get the city in the most trouble because the council has no say of their decision. So the council finds herself, potential litigation by 3 fresh new people coming onto the Board of Adjustments with no experience sitting and making that decision. I'm not saying it's not capable, people's not can handle something like that. They may can. It depends on the appointee that the council appoints to replace with. But someone needs to really probably take a strong look at that as far as that particular board. Now, if you want to branch it all the way across and say every board, I'm against the term limits for the planning board. Is the council against term limits for their position?
Well, since I've been elected more than once, I'm gonna have to say yeah.
I mean,
But Dean, I think we're smart enough to take that board and stagger the people and not lose them all at one time. I think we could do that at individual board. I'm sure we could accomplish that. But I think your question really lies with term limits is where you're at.
And you're taking away the council's ability to make that decision. You're taking 3 off, you're taking that term. If the council wanted to keep someone there, you're taking that away from them. The decision for these boards should be strictly the council, not a procedural thing that's governed by policy that you've got to come off in 3 years. The council ought to have that decision solely at their discretion, just like they have that discretion to remove someone from a board for cause.
Let me ask you a question, Dean. When are these 3? up for coming off of that board?
I think next year.
Okay.
Oh, 3 people to come up next year potentially. I think it's the next year you can, or the year after. It's within the next
So-
2 years.
Okay, so this doesn't actually take effect until everyone's completed all of their terms. So you would still, those individuals would have completed their terms at this point. Is that what you're saying? Have they done at least 2 years?
I'm-
2 terms, I'm sorry.
Let me pull up and see what the,
Or would the 2 terms start after it's, which one?
This is not meant to hinder anything that's currently happening. This is when everything is finished and people finish out, just as serving on 2 boards. We have folks that are serving on 3. We're not going to take them off a board. What this is meant to do is to take place after everything is finished. After they have finished whatever it is they're doing, that's when this takes place. So this is something fresh that should start moving forward,
Mhm.
not moving backwards.
So is that to say everybody's clocks restart on their terms? So next time Dean's appointed, he gets 2 full terms and then a year off?
It could, and we still, I mean, I think that hasn't been firmly decided how that would happen, and that needs to be part of what this council determines. We did not go to that specific area except to say this does not go backwards and is not supposed to hinder what is currently taking place. This is supposed to be something that moves forward, and in their minds and discussion, this in some cases could be 6 years out before it takes effect, depending on what people's terms are.
I don't have the end of the current terms on hand, but it does specify in the draft ordinance that you will never have more than half of the board coming off in a single year. So you would not, under this ordinance, be allowed to have 3 people leave the Board of Adjustment in a single year.
Right.
That changes things a little for me if it's not retroactive.
Well, I just see the talented people that would take a year off and say, I ain't going back.
One of those people would be a Jay Cook, and Jay Cook's done it numerous times, just to point out, because Chip used him as an example. He has done that numerous times. It has to do with a person's interest in the city. And someone who is committed to the city will come back.
I still don't like that idea. I really don't.
But
What else
there's,
you got, Dean?
You know, and Melanie, y'all may have looked at, did you look at Carborough's term limits?
We've looked at several municipalities.
And the reason I say that is I think Carborough has a 2-3-year appointments, and then the council has the option to appoint for a 3rd 3-year appointment under their term limits that they go by there. I looked at numerous ones across the state, and I didn't call anyone. I don't know how well they work. They could be working fabulous. But I was just concerned about taking that many people off the Board of Adjustments at one time could potentially create some problems for the city. And with 5 sitting there,
You're not going to ever take off a majority. That shouldn't happen.
but even if you took 2, that's that board right there, the Board of Adjustments may be scheduled to meet 12 months out of the year, but may only have 1 item in 12 months. So what I'm saying is there's not enough training, enough experience sitting on that board if you go to pulling someone off who's never sat at a meeting. Because it's not something that's, regularly, that we have some on the agenda regularly. That's the only thing I'm saying is it just some consideration, whether it's all of the boards, but that one board might need to be addressed separately somehow, or some extra, care looked at that, because I just don't want to see the city looking at litigation because of we implemented a term limit to take someone off, and we take them off just because their term's up, and then they don't have a meeting for the next 8 months, and then this new person that comes on has no experience at all, or 2 new people come on that don't have that experience, and it could create an issue. That's all I'm
See what you're
suggesting.
saying. Sure.
Thank you.
Dean. Well said. Anyone else? Jan, come up, please. Jan, let us have your name and address, if you would.
Jan Searles, 526 East Pine Street. We've talked a lot about this. And I was one of on the task force. And before that, I mean, with other people I've been on boards with, we've talked about it because there is a feeling on people we have a lot of new people coming to Graham, but we have a lot of people getting very interested in getting involved in Graham. And they felt there was no way. We, this last time, appointed 2 young people. And one is on a tree board with me, the other one is on the planning board. But the energy they brought and the insight, and it has really impressed me that every board I've sat on has been about, the point of view has been from mine, which, you know, that they're my peers in age. And that's the point of view. And getting young input and eager input, and maybe they haven't been to every meeting, but they now watch old meetings. But there is an energy here from young people. And one of the things we were seeing doing this, I was seeing anyway, was by having it 2 years and a break, people think there's hope they can get on a board. And that's, you know, when you have your 1 year off, there's nothing to stop you from attending. They're open meetings. And as someone who's been a chairman of 2 boards and stretching over about 10 years between them, I'd love to have a year off and come back. You get a different perspective, and when you come back from a year off, someone else is chairman, and you can really work with the board and hopefully be able to see it from a different perspective. So I personally see this as a win-win because you always have the option as a council of making a decision for the good of the city.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else want to speak on this? Tom, you got something? Come up.
Mr. Mayor, I had questions, much of which have already been dealt with, although it's still not clear to me where you're ending up in terms of what it even says. The description, as I understood it from the discussion at the task force meetings, was to impose a limit. The answers to Councilman McClure's question seem to be that this would be prospective in the future, which at least makes it better. But I think the issue that you really need to look at, and I know that it's a danger to compare or to use any analogy from another jurisdiction, much less one that is a kind of competitor of sorts. But I do think there's a striking issue in that Graham has had, as have some other local boards, significant tenure on some of its most significant and important boards. And without disparaging any of the other boards, certainly planning and board of adjustments are the sort of top boards that the council relies on for advice. And so you look at, in the past, we've had planning board chairmen typically for 10 to 15 years here, both of which, which wouldn't be allowed under this new scheme. You look at Mebane, which is the one I hate to mention, but they've had chairmen and members of their boards on for long stretches. And I think the issue is the age-old issue of experience versus the diversity of new opinion and new blood, which was mentioned earlier. But the difficulty is that's a trade-off. And the question is, which is more important? I would argue that experience is important. Experience and context that the members are able to give based on, well, this is similar to the case we had with Joe 5 years ago. We did this for him. We need to be sure that we do the same thing for this person this time. And the difficulty is there's no institutional memory when you have shorter and shorter time frames for members serving on the boards. So I think the issue of term limits is a dangerous one for the council in terms of the caliber and quality of the advice you will be getting, and in terms of what the subordinate boards are going to be able to provide to you will be reduced to have the term limits. That's a comment. I have a question. I didn't understand Council Members Wiggins' description that the procedures and guidelines would not be subject to council review or approval.
They're not. They're an administrative manual. That's administratively how you do policy and procedure. It is not ordinances.
Okay. It would seem to me, Mr. Mayor, that y'all need to be in charge of all dimensions of these boards. And that this is not something that's to be relegated or delegated in either case to staff, but rather it's something that the policies should be determined by the council. And once they're determined, yeah, day to day, week to week, the staff will implement them. But in my opinion, and I'm particularly concerned by some of the discussion that I heard at the task force meetings, that in my opinion was giving far too much deference to the staff, when I believe the elected officials should be the ones who make the policy determinations, and then the staff should be in charge of implementing those.
And thank you, sir. Anyone else want to speak on this? Nathan?
Good evening again. Nate Perry, 201 South Maple Street. I feel like I agree with a little bit of everything that everybody said so far. I've been along for the whole ride on this, as well as several of you guys and Jan. And where I'm at with this is I see exactly where Dean's coming from. Institutional, intellectual knowledge is important in a lot of what we do. I agree, and I want to also applaud him. He's been doing a great job in the first 2 meetings I've been in with him for chair and planning and zoning. I get that, and I agree with it. We don't want a massive vacuum of knowledge to happen on any board, even for, as others have put it, lesser boards, not lesser importance, but gravity as far as how they can affect the city's business. However, I agree with Jan. And other areas where we've talked about this is Jay Cook and others that have been the chair of their board or commission for 10, 15, 20 years. The reason why, and I've been approached by Jay to be that chair whenever I was on that board multiple times, Jay is basically begging people to take the chair position, and probably has been for years. Nobody will take it because Jay does a good job at it, and it's a pretty straightforward thing. I mean, Jay's exceptional at it. So the problem is there's no rule saying, Jay, you got to get out, and somebody else needs to pick up the slack and start to learn that institutional, intellectual capacity of the role. So to Jan's point, also, it took me a long time to get onto planning and zoning. And I'm not saying it's entitled, but as much as it's not entitled for someone with no capacity, it should also be not entitled that it's a lifetime appointment. And aside from Barry Hicks, I think the last 2 removals have been health-related, dementia-related, capacity to do the job related. And I realize that's ironic that one of them appears to be our new councilman. However, the situation is you can't just let people ride it until they die. And so that's where I'm at. I'm kind of on all 3 of these, and I want the council to have purview. This is not to strip any power. So I'm kind of taking notes from all 3 of these guys, but that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Nate. Anyone else want to speak on this? If not, then we'll close the public hearing. And this is the first reading of this. What that means, if it passes 4 to 1, it goes into effect. If it's 3 to 2, then we read it again next month. And it has to pass again by a majority next month. So what does everybody think?
I'm not saying I do support the term limit staying in, but I would not support it without clarity on, what was your word? It was better than mine. Prospective, as opposed to being retroactive and including the 6 years already served and wiping somebody or knocking somebody out next year. I think that gives people, it gives time to plan ahead and look ahead.
That's our decision. That's why it's not in there. This is strictly ordinance, but we are not getting, this task force did not get into things that were our job as a city council. So
I see it as a working manual is what you're doing.
well, the manual is not a policy-making manual. The
Exactly.
manual is a guideline for staff and the volunteers how to move through the process, getting minutes, with what our Robert's Rules of Order are. That's what the manual is all about. That's the only thing that the manual, it does not do policy and procedure and take our job. That still comes to us. What it says is what happens when we take an application. What does the application look like? Are we getting everything we need? What is going to happen? Who deals with it? The clerk deals with it, and who else deals with it? It gives clarity to all the board chairs and to the staff, because that's been a huge mix-up of who has responsibility to do what next. It gives them clarity in procedurally how they handle things, getting information in 48 hours, getting their minutes into the clerk. That's what that manual does. That's all that does. It gives clarity to staff and volunteers alike to know what they're doing, what their roles are, and how they move. That's the only thing that's in the manual. This is your policy and procedure right here. And if you want something changed, they did their job. They voted on things. They've given you the ordinances. If you don't like something, then this is what we change. And again, they didn't go for, we discussed having everybody finish out what they're doing in a couple of meetings. I think maybe you weren't there, but we discussed all that and then moving forward. Now, that comes back to this group. Do you want to put that in there? How do you want to say that? But what we were what this group was intent about is not disrupting what terms are already being done and changing things.
I understand that, but we're voting on this section of this thing. If there's a change to be made, we can make it right here.
Absolutely, right now.
I'm just now, and that's just me. I'm willing to let us vote on it and see where we'll go with this, knowing it's the first reading, and we can work on it during this month.
Or we can get it straight and go ahead and approve it with a 4-1 vote.
Right.
If that's our only hangup with this, why delay it another month to fix what you already want to fix?
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with us putting it for a vote and seeing where we're at. I'm okay with it. So.
But we're still in discussion about
Yeah.
that, I think.
Yeah. I would like to say that the one note that I had made when I read through this was the note that I felt like term limits might be something we could explore, but that the 2-3-year terms was too short. The first thing that came to my mind was going to 3-3-year terms. First thing right off the bat, I said, that's just too short. Getting back to the same concerns that were brought up here tonight, taking that institutional information that one gathers by working on a difficult board, planning board, board of adjustments, HRC, that's short. 2-3-year terms is very short. There's quite a learning curve in that process. And I just thought those were mighty short.
It takes almost one term for them to figure out on these boards. Again, to that point of Board of Adjustments, Planning Board, HRC, those are quasi-judicial important boards, and it takes them probably a good term to figure out what the heck is going on and how to do their jobs. I have no problem with adjusting whatever that needs to be.
All right. Are you ready for a vote then on this, knowing this is the first reading?
Well, let me ask a question. I don't know who it goes to, but what's the mechanism to say this isn't retrospective, that everybody's
You say it.
board tenure starts now?
You say it and you put it in there.
You have a question, I'm sorry.
I have a procedural question, Mr. Mayor. My question is, if the document that you're looking at is amended, does that not keep it at first reading?
Yeah, well, if they amend it now, I think you can move forward. This would be the first reading, but if they amend it after they vote, then I think the next time, like we got into that last time, it ended up being.
If we amend it between now and next meeting,
Yeah.
it would make it the first reading next meeting.
But if we,
Well, no, but that's my question. Basically, if I understood what sort of was pending is maybe a motion coming. And the question is if a motion comes, is it still wrapped up tonight, or does that make it become a first reading for next month?
guess it depends on if they amend it before they make the motion and vote on it.
But there's
If
nothing
it
that just
passes
says they only
4-1.
have to make one motion, right? I mean, they could
No.
make 6 motions on it.
Right.
Good question. I appreciate my.
It's my
Well, iron
understanding
around.
that a reading is
When it's
was
first
when
brought
it's
up.
introduced.
Yeah.
It's when it's introduced.
But it has to be voted on because of 4-1 vote passes.
It would on a first reading, but a first reading is
Even if
the,
we
the
amended it?
introduction of the subject.
It would pass 4-1 even if we amended a letter?
We
That's
need to
my
amend it
understanding.
Before we vote on it.
So, to our point on whether we're looking backward or forward. So that necessarily would not live here, though. That would need to be our policy if you so choose. But that I don't think goes in actually the ordinance part. Is that correct? If we were to say whether it's retroactive or it's prospective and we move forward, that actually is not, that's a one-time thing. That is not in the code of ordinance.
I don't think it would go in the ordinance, in the amendment to the ordinance, but it could go in the motion.
It could. Could it not?
I'm assuming it could, but like you were saying, that's the council's
Right.
decision as far as like whether to make it retroactive.
Right, exactly.
Even-
Once we actually voted on this, and if it passed, then what you're going to do after that is make another motion to say that this now becomes prospective, not retroactive, and begins at such a time. Follow me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all right with that.
I'll make a
that
motion.
information.
So there are two different motions, right?
It can be baked into the same motion, I think.
Can we? You want to do it? Okay, that's fine.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance amending various sections related to boards and commissions of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Graham, North Carolina, with the amendment to letter C that it changes from 2 to 3 consecutive full terms
All right.
with
Wait.
the additional caveat that these ordinance be prospective, not retrospective in their application.
I understand that. With that, I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise, aye.
Aye.
So the motion carries 3-2 as a first reading, though it moves to next month. We'll work on it, look at it, and you can try to convince me. All right.
Convinced about what?
Do with everything but term.
I mean, but I'd like to look at it a little bit more. I like to look at Carbur's and see where that's at, because I'll read Carbur's and see where that's at. All right, next we go to first reading, the ordinance City of Graham's, the ordinance of the City Council of the City of Graham amending Chapter 13 Utilities, Article 2 Connections of Code of Ordinance. Aaron, you taking care of this for us?
Yes, sir. What you have before you is a draft that was prepared by city staff as well as our engineers and reviewed by our attorneys, and it's based on a model program provided by the EPA and tailored for the City of Graham. We are required to adopt this because an update to the state of North Carolina's administrative code mandates an amendment to our ordinances to add language to address cross connections and backflow prevention. The purpose of this ordinance is to establish a backflow prevention program to protect our drinking water from pollution and or contamination that can occur from back pressure or back siphonage from non-potable sources. Other jurisdictions within the area have already taken the necessary steps to adopt the appropriate language, including Mebane, which is a partner with our water treatment operations. City staff recognizes that without proper protection devices, cross connections can occur that can contaminate and endanger the public water supply. And with that being said, staff does recommend approval.
Thank you, sir. Questions, the Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. So the decision as to what that backflow preventer is going to look like is still will be determined by our water department supervisor as to what the best application is. There's not going to be any set standards for that. It will depend on the certain situation, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Based on the conversation that I had,
We have some standards.
Yes.
Spec book that sometimes it's simple device. Sometimes it's more complex, depends on the application. Sometimes it's the RPZ device, sometimes not. But we have, in practice, without an ordinance, and some of it's plumbing code and other codes, but have been implementing backflow devices for certain applications for several years now.
And that was going to be my next question, is we are actually practicing the implementation of those
Very
devices
common,
right now.
an irrigation system, a residential
Absolutely.
irrigation system.
Absolutely.
Most, well, all now will require some sort of backflow prevention. But this is the next step. It's putting things and giving it the effect of law and providing consistency with state administrative code.
Sure.
Right, and what I was going to say was that the conversations I had with Tanya, we are doing, a lot of what they're proposing that we do. It's just now we're actually formalizing it, putting it in our ordinance.
Thank you.
Ellie?
No.
Lee got mine. Thank you.
No questions. I have no questions. Anybody from the floor want to speak on this? Come up, Kevin. Scott. I was close. Come up, Mr. Pickard.
Got Pickard 101 Southwood Court, Graham. Basically, the way this boils down to is you're either going to pass up and have a policy or the state's going to be on your back. So you got to come up with something.
Thank you. Anyone else?
There you go.
All right. All right, I'll move you to page 64, and I will ask for a motion from the council. All right, I'll make the motion. I move to approve the ordinance amendment of Chapter 13, Utilities, Article 2, Connections of the Code of Ordinance to add language to establish a cross-connection and backflow prevention program. And I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Since it's the first reading, it passes 5-0, so it goes ahead and passes on our Code of Ordinances. Next, we have issues not on tonight's agenda. Jennifer, are you going to speak again? Okay, good deal. Nathan, you got anything?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Aaron?
Just something quick. Mary had to leave, but she just wanted me to remind you guys of the ribbon cutting for the Power Up Arcade at 12 o'clock noon. I believe you already have the invitation sent out.
Brian, anything?
No, sir.
Darcy?
No, sir.
Melody?
Yes, I would like to commend all of the task force members who have spent the last 5 months, many hours working on this document for you. Not one of you mentioned that, and I'm sure that they appreciated that tonight. I would appreciate it next time. Next time, we won't save any money for the city of Graham because that is normally done by a planning group. So we just saved you thousands and thousands of dollars, and not one of you thanked them. I appreciate that.
Griffin, anything?
No, sir.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Lee?
Nothing.
Frank?
Nothing.
Yes, I have a proclamation of utmost importance. I'd like to wish Mayor Peterman a happy birthday, as well as Mary Fawcett.
Wherever Mary went. Thank you very much. All right, tomorrow we have the Graham High School Chorus down at the Civic Center at 8 o'clock. Everybody try to be down there. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, sir. I need a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No.